morning and welcome. October 25th, 2023, Board of Directors meeting. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Chris, would you please take roll?
Yes, Division 1.
Here.
Division 2.
Here.
Division 3.
Here.
Division 4.
Here.
Division 5.
Here.
Do we have any public comment for items not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none,
We are pulling an item from the agenda,
okay,
so I just wanted to have that noted for the record.
all right.
And that is item 6A, will be moved to a date likely the first meeting in December.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So we will go back to our retirement. Are we ready for our retirement presentation?
We are, but unfortunately, our retiree is not able to join us, but Kian did still want to recognize him and say some kind words. I
I
know.
have a speech and everything.
I know,
okay.
we're still gonna celebrate him.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have a couple of members of the Hydro team that have joined us today to celebrate Dean as well. So I do have a bit of a speech, so bear with me as I make my way through this. We're here today to celebrate a remarkable individual and his dedicated service to Nevada Irrigation District. As Dean Rutter embarks into retirement, it's only fitting that we take a moment to stand back and to reflect on his career. Dean began his journey to the district while working at Colfax Motor Parts, when then Hydro Superintendent Dick Eckenberg approached the front counter and asked Dean if he knew of anyone that was looking for a job. In April of 1988, Dean started with NID as a temp. Put in his notice, it sounds like that day, and joined us. So, last meeting, when Doug spoke about Stu, he gave the rest of us a glimpse into what was going on in the world when Stu started. So I wanted to take a minute to reflect on what was happening in 1988 when Dean started. Dodgers fans in the room, and I'm looking at you, Chip. We'll remember that year is the year that Kurt Gibson hit the walk-off home run off of Dennis Eckersley with the A's.
Painful.
And limped around the bases, and pretty much ended that. Nike launched one of the most successful marketing campaigns in advertising history with the debut of their Just Do It slogan. When I wrote this down, I realized it's very dated because it was 1988 was the first year that CDs outsold vinyl records. And when I wrote that down, I realized my kids don't even know what a CD is. So, in 1988, Bill Gates announced the launch of Microsoft Office, which, as we all know, we're using almost daily. The concept of global warming first earned national attention when James Hansen spoke to the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources and explained that climate change had already begun due to greenhouse gas effect. A gallon of milk cost $2.30, a loaf of white bread was 60 cents, a dozen eggs were 89 cents, and a gallon of gas was about 96 cents. On the local front, the 49er fire started in September 11th of 1988, burned about 33,000 acres, and was kind of one of the first fires that's pointed to as in the wild urban interface. It was one of the initial ones that really got people talking. In 1988, the average treated water bill at NID was about $21.33, compared to about $70 now. And a miner's inch of summer raw water was about $219. So, back to Dean. Dean was a temp for NID off and on until December 16th of 1991, when he became a full-time utility worker. In 1996, he transferred to the mechanical shop as an equipment service worker and was promoted to an equipment mechanic about a year later. In 2005, Dean was promoted to a hydroelectric roving utility worker and joined the hydro team and never looked back. In 2018, he was reclassified as a hydro maintenance technician, and that's where he will retire, or where he did retire, on October 1st after about 32 years of service to the district. During his career, Dean had the opportunity to complete a generator rewind helped during some of the largest winter years recorded and has always lent a helping hand and a smile whenever needed. Dean witnessed the evolution of the district's hydroelectric department from our time with PG&E to selling power on the open market. During his time, Dean has always been a dedicated employee and led the team by example. He was always willing to jump in a snowplow or backhoe during the worst weather we have experienced, and Phil, our maintenance superintendent, jokes that Dean has probably plowed as many miles of snow as the earth is around. Dean's excellent attitude, experience, and knowledge of the district is going to be missed. On a personal note, and I'll make sure I say this next time I see him, I would like to thank Dean for welcoming me to the hydroelectric department. In 2012, we had a significant equipment failure out at the Bowman Dam. I was the engineer on that repair and didn't know much about the hydro department at that time. I distinctly remember Dean giving me a ride to the dam in his older, underpowered service truck. Our conversation on that drive made me feel welcomed and helped me realize that I had found a home with a group of hardworking men and women. I was going to say this to him and shake his hand at this time, but on behalf of your colleagues, past and present, Dean, we want to express our deep appreciation for your dedication and outstanding service. We wish you the best in the next chapter in your life and hope it is filled with joy, relaxation, and the opportunity to pursue all the dreams and adventures you've been waiting for. He has certainly earned it, and we thank Dean for his time with the district.
Oh, I have President Holt, if you wouldn't mind, can we just have like a 5-minute break so that we can make sure the hydro team can take some cupcakes?
Okay, good morning. Yes, I can. Thank you. So we're going to begin with our investment portfolio review. Jennifer, will you be giving the intro? We're just launching straight on.
Well, this is our quarterly review, and our wonderful investment advisors at PFM will be leading the presentations. I'll just turn it over to Allison. I see she joined us.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. I can go ahead and share my screen. If that's what you would like me to do. All right. Yeah, like I said, good morning. And as Jennifer mentioned, I'm here today representing PFM Asset Management, the district's investment advisor, to provide an update on your portfolio as of September 30th. So as we usually do, I'll just start with a brief economic and interest rate update. So this page here, just highlighting, the major themes during the quarter. In the U.S. economy, we continue to have stronger than expected growth. So far this year, GDP has come in for the first 2 quarters at right around 2%. Third quarter GDP, which will be released tomorrow, is expected to be even stronger, with estimates at around 3 to even 5%. And that really continues to be driven by the consumer. And we say stronger than expected, as you might recall, last year or late last year, even early into this year, most expected that we would see a recession in 2023, with the Fed hiking interest rates, trying to lower inflation, does have a tendency to slow down growth, and historically has pushed the U.S. into a recession. But so far, despite the Fed's aggressive actions with monetary policy, growth has been strong. And again, as I mentioned, really driven by the consumer. Inflation does still remain elevated. However, it continues to move lower. And I'll talk about that more on the next page. And then the job market has continued to be very strong. The unemployment rate at 3.8% has been below 4% for well over a year now. And we continue to see, large numbers, meaning around 200,000 or more jobs added each month. So very strong job growth and overall relatively strong growth in the economy. Now turning to the Fed. As a reminder, the Fed has been hiking interest rates through their Fed. Yes.
Allison, 1 second. Rich has a question for you.
A couple of questions. How do you factor in car repossessions are going to an all-time high, and that a lot of people are living on their credit cards? So looking forward, how do we factor that into the fact that there's a major part of the economy that is going underwater to keep everything alive.
Yeah, so that is a good observation, and we have seen credit card debt increasing quite a bit lately. We've seen, as you mentioned, savings. The savings rate, the amount that people are saving, has gone down a lot, and this is especially true when we compare it to the last few years. Many people built up their savings during the pandemic because we weren't spending as much, and because, receiving those stimulus checks. So savings really built up. And while the increase in credit card debt, the decrease in savings is something that is being watched carefully, because, if it continues, if the pace picks up, it can, mean slower growth in the future. But one thing we do see is that if we pull out the period during the recession where savings increased so much, and where credit cards, weren't used as much, we are on the same trend that we were pre-pandemic, as far as, increasing credit card balances, declining savings, which had been kind of slowly going in that direction for some time. So we are still on trend, but those numbers are something, those directions of those are something that, we are keeping an eye on, but also, of course, the economic forecasters and such are keeping an eye on as well. When we look at auto loans and, the not making payments or cars being repossessed, again, that has been ticking up a bit recently, not like we saw in the past. And when we look at which loans, are being forfeited, it's those subprime loans, again, which is typically what we see. So kind of with all three of those things, they're on trend, if you will, especially if we take out the pandemic time period, but things that are carefully being watched, because if they pick up pace or if the pace continues, we could see a slowdown moving forward.
One quick last question. On the labor market, one of the job creation has been been the government hiring. And
Is that true?
Yeah.
Private sector? I thought there was a lot of private sector.
there has been the last one, but every time a new job report comes out, they go back a few months and decrease the amount of jobs that were created. But I will say, in the farming, we're seeing labor, these labor contractors showing up with much bigger crews than before. And so that people are starting to work in the ag community in numbers we haven't seen in a while.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Oops.
It helps a lot.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, thank you for that comment. Yeah, a lot of times when we talk about, when I speak to jobs, it's and that number we see reported in the news, it's always the non-farm payroll numbers that we see. And to your point, they always do go back a few months and revise as they get new data. And lately that's been, somewhat declines in the number of jobs added. But that's interesting about the farm jobs up there as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
So picking back up at the Fed, so I mentioned, as we've talked about the last several meetings, the Fed has been hiking their Fed funds target rate in an effort to bring down inflation. The Fed began hiking that rate, which was at about 0% back in March of 2022. They began hiking it at that time. And as of September 30th, that target rate is now at a range of 5.25% to 5.5%. The last hike we saw came in July. Since in September, the Fed held rates steady. The Fed next meets in November, and right now the expectation is that the Fed will not hike rates in November. So we may be at the end of the Fed's rate hiking cycle. There's a December meeting as well. Projections say maybe the Fed will hike one more time in 2023, maybe not. But because of the Fed's actions over the last year and a half, we've continued to see interest rates across the yield curve move higher. As of September 30th, interest rates were at their highest levels since 2006 or 2007, so almost 20 years. Again, just really driven by the Fed hiking interest rates. This most recent quarter, we saw a pretty big movement on the longer end of the yield curve, 5 years and out, especially 10-year and 30-year interest rates jumped up quite a bit over the last quarter. Despite that, the yield curve does still remain inverted. Turning to the next page, just a little bit more on inflation. This page here shows inflation as measured by CPI, or Consumer Price Index, and the red line is the inflation numbers. So this was as of August, where the inflation year-over-year increase in prices was 3.7%. September's figure just came out and was the same, 3.7%. So compared to September of last year, prices are up 3.7%. It's a big improvement from where we were back in June of 2022, but still well above the Fed's 2% target. This chart here also breaks down some of the major categories contributing to CPI or contributing to inflation. That blue bar there, the services, has really been the biggest piece for some time now. That goods inflation, when everybody was purchasing things, especially online, that picked up for a while, but has since come down. But that services inflation has been a bit stickier. Within services, we have the category of shelter or rents, and shelter, rent, home prices, have been moving up quite sharply for some time, and that's been a big contributor to overall inflation. More recently, the last couple of months, we've seen shelter prices come down, but those figures flow into CPI at a bit of a lag. And so it'll take a little time for that, the declining shelter prices, to make its way into overall CPI. But most recent number, again, as of September, gas, energy prices increasing, and then that shelter price, again, was a big contributor, keeping inflation at 3.7%. We're now going to turn to, yeah.
Going forward, so the Middle East is in turmoil. How do you factor that into the energy prices? How do you account for that going forward? Because producing 3 million barrels a day, and Saudi Arabia and everybody, but if all that gets erupted, how do you factor that in, or can you?
Well, it will certainly have an impact if we do see supply impacted. As the cost globally goes higher, which would happen if supply goes down due to various conflicts, resulting in oil not moving around the globe, we will certainly see prices move higher. It's interesting, in the U.S., we don't import as much oil, most certainly, as we used to, but because it is a global market, the price impacts would still be felt here. So it is something that we could see move higher and either keep inflation, elevated, or even potentially tick it up a bit higher, in the coming months, depending on how oil is impacted by the various conflicts. That is actually one of the reasons, the volatility in oil and so many things out of our control is one of the reasons when the Fed sets their 2% target, they actually exclude energy prices. It's referred to as core inflation. It excludes both energy and food prices. So that won't necessarily impact the Fed's decisions if we see inflation move higher, strictly because oil prices are moving higher. Like I said, the Fed doesn't necessarily look at that when deciding monetary policy. And so it won't necessarily have an impact on Fed activity, but certainly could have an impact on what we're paying at the pump and overall inflation.
How can the Fed disassociate themselves from energy and food?
Yeah, I mean, they look at the data most certainly, and they pay attention to it. But yeah, when they set that 2% target, they have, they take that out of the calculation the inflation calculation. When we look at currently what's happening, inflation as of September at 3.7%. If we take out food and energy, inflation is actually a bit higher at 4.1%. And that's mainly because oil, while gas prices have ticked up a bit in the past few months, it's down from where it was a year ago, and we're looking at year-over-year numbers. So the volatility is the Fed's reason for excluding that. I think it's a little interesting too, because not only gas, but also food is a huge part of what we spend our money on. But again, while they look at it, they don't factor that into when they look at that 2% target and then overall monetary policy. All right, I'll pick back up here on this page. Here we're showing the dot plot. I think it's usually included in most of the reports we send you. The Federal Open Market Committee puts this together 4 times a year. The last time was at their September meeting. And what it shows is where they think the Fed funds target rate, or rate that they set, should be at each calendar year end. And so each dot represents a member's vote, if you will, at each year end of where they think the Fed funds target rate should be. So if we look at 2023 on the left-hand side, as I mentioned, the rate is currently at a range of 425 to 450, so right here. And so what this showed us that at mid-September, a slight majority of Fed members thought we needed one more rate hike in 2023. What we saw looking further was a bit more surprising. If we look at 2024, now not only factoring in those blue dots and that darker blue line, which is a median of the dots. If we also look at that lighter blue line, which was the median back at their June meeting, we saw a pretty big jump over those 3 months of where the Fed thought the target rate should be next year. So next year, at the end of next year, the Fed is saying maybe 1 or maybe 2 rate cuts in 2024, as opposed to saying about 4 rate cuts at their June meeting. And so this really has the market thinking the Fed will keep interest rates higher for longer. And that had an impact on those longer term interest rates. It's one of the reasons we saw the longer term, 10, 20, 30-year interest rates move up quite a bit higher during the quarter, this higher for longer mindset. On a quarterly basis, or 4 times a year, the Fed also releases their projection for various economic indicators. The biggest change was the left-hand corner, which was GDP. Back in June, which are the lighter bars, the Fed thought GDP would be right around 1% in 2023. In September, they increased that to 2%. It wasn't a big surprise. The first half of the year, growth was 2%, basically. I mentioned third quarter GDP is expected to be even stronger, so it makes sense that the Fed increased their projection for 2023. Looking out the next couple of years for GDP, you can see the Fed expects slower growth, but continued growth, about in line, maybe a little lower than where we were pre-pandemic, when growth was around 2.5% or so. So slowing, but expected to stay positive. It doesn't mean that we won't see a recession in 2024, but overall, the Fed expects as of September that any slowdown would likely be short-lived, and we will see overall growth for the entire year. Some of the other projections, economic indicators the Fed looks at on the upper right-hand corner, the unemployment rate, essentially unchanged for the rest of the year at 3.8%, maybe ticking a little bit higher over the next couple of years. The lower left-hand corner is inflation. This is PCE, personal consumption expenditure, a little different than CPI, typically a little lower than CPI, but trends similarly. This is the Fed prefers to look at PCE over CPI. But you can see at the end of 2023, they still think inflation will be a little bit above 3%. And then it will take several years, showing 2026, before inflation gets down to 2%. And so that's also one of the reasons why the Fed is saying, and the market expects, that the Fed will keep rates high. You know, we might be done with rate hikes, but the rate will stay quite elevated for some time to continue to bring down inflation. And then lastly, the right-hand side, it essentially ties back to that chart we saw on the prior page, that Fed funds target rate. And again, the 2024, going from that light bar to the dark bar, in 2025, the light bar to the dark bar, that was the big surprise for the market, to see that increase, again, that higher for longer idea following the release of this information. Just a couple more slides in the market update. Now just looking at interest rates, showing the US Treasury yield curve. We are showing it out to 30 years. In the district's portfolio, we do invest in securities with maturities of 5 years and under. So this portion over here. And then we show where interest rates were at September 30th in the dark blue line, and then June 30th in the dotted line. So quarter over quarter change. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, rates did move higher across the entire yield curve, with the bigger increases certainly coming on that longer end of the yield curve. So the inversion did flatten a little bit compared to where it was, but the yield curve is still inverted. Those very short-term rates remain higher than longer-term rates. And then on this chart, we also show the range over the past 15 years, just highlighting, you know, we are at those highest levels. I mentioned in, I think it's about 17 years, but here you can see for the past 15, right at the upper edge of interest rates.
Allison?
And then, yes.
Allison? Yeah, hi. So on those interest rates this morning, the 10-year is pushing right at 5%, 30 years over 5%, and the 2-year is 5.1 or a little above. So still inverted, but it questions, the interest rates are rising higher than they expected. So this geopolitical turmoil, most of those countries that are lining up against the United States do not want the United States dollar as the currency for the world. So that has an effect on demand and supply. 45% of the production in the world is against the US dollar as the world currency. So isn't that going to influence interest rates maybe more than the Fed can?
Yeah, especially longer term interest rates. You know, the Fed, what the Fed does with the Fed funds target rate, the biggest impact are on those shorter term interest rates. You know, very short term, but even out to several years. You know, those longer term rates, they are impacted by the Fed, you know, somewhat, but they're impacted more by some of the things you mentioned, you know, supply or demand, I should say. Also, what the government does as far as issuing debt for borrowing purposes. As you know, the deficit has been in the news a lot lately, has grown significantly. Also influenced by long-term inflation and by long-term growth expectations. So certainly those longer-term interest rates, while they do feel some impact from the Fed, it's much more those bigger issues, including global issues, that affect interest rates on the longer end.
So I just trust you to take that all into account.
Oh, yeah.
Because, yeah, how do you, I mean, instead of relying on the Fed and what they wish for, because
yeah.
I'm just, in my opinion, there's not as much control that they want to be.
Yeah, I think it's certainly true that, you know, big thing the Fed always talks about is that the tools they have are quite blunt. You know, they can't really, when they've been trying to bring down inflation by raising the target rate, I mean, it should have that effect, but it also has other effects. And it can't necessarily, you know, it hasn't necessarily brought down inflation as quickly as they had liked. One of the reasons we do focus on, you know, what the Fed is doing and how it impacts interest rates is because with the district's portfolio, we really are focused on that 5-year and under range in terms of the investments we're buying for you. And so that is why much of my focus is on that. But to your point, there are certainly other factors influencing interest rates and those that are out of the Fed's control. So thank you.
Yeah, because I saw a chart that was charting, interest rates today are, in the last few years, are charting exactly like they did in the 1970s, when interest rates went up in early 80s up to over 20%. And some of the same factors are in play. So I just wanted to get that out there, and I'm glad you're aware of it.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And I know that some of that had also, or a lot of that had to do with inflation as well. So it does look like, you know, the Fed is getting inflation under control, again, as much as they can control it, because there certainly are things out of their control. But so far, you know, things appear to be going as well. And I don't think there's expectations to see interest rates move that high like we saw back then. Most think right now we probably hit peak interest rates on the shorter end, again, where the Fed kind of has more control. We've likely kind of hit the peak, but there is certainly a lot of uncertainty and, again, a lot of factors. And then just lastly, in the economic update, our returns. As we'll talk about in a few pages, we'll show the return on the district's portfolio versus your benchmark. Here we're just looking at market returns with 1 to 5 year indices. So the left-hand side were the returns for the third quarter. As a reminder, these are total returns, so they take into account both realized earnings and unrealized gains or losses due to market value changes. So this quarter, while rates did move up a little bit, the realized earnings portion made up for any unrealized losses, and we did see positive returns among the different sectors. This was a quarter where treasuries were the lowest performer, so diversification was beneficial during the quarter. And then the right-hand side just showing the annualized return for the past 10 years. Of course, positive returns, and also, again, that diversification away from government historically has resulted in higher returns. All right, I'll now move into the portfolio. So this page here, the consolidated summary. As a reminder, as we talked about, you know, kind of two buckets of money for the district. A great majority, about $90 million of the 91, is in a portfolio with a 1 to 5 year strategy, actively managed by PFM. And then there's about a little over 1 million that are in bank CDs, and those are kind of kept separate because of the illiquid nature. The city or the district continues to earn interest on those, and then as they mature, they'll move in with the other funds. But so right around $91 million. The sector allocation, a majority of that is in federal agency securities. And then if we look at the maturity distribution, a majority of the funds in 1 to 3 year securities, with the maximum out to 5 years. The next page lists all of the issuers in the portfolio by sector, again, including those bank CDs. So you can see the diversification, the low allocation once you get out of treasuries and federal agencies to each individual issuer. And then you can also see the credit ratings. So now moving into the larger group of money, that the portfolio that's actively managed by PFM. Again, just under $90 million on a market value basis. The portfolio is managed according to a 1 to 5 year strategy. So if we look at the distribution down in the lower right-hand corner, you can see the portfolio in blue versus the benchmark in gray. The benchmark includes every U.S. Treasury with a maturity from 1 to 5 years. The portfolio's overall duration, similar to average maturity, is 1.3, so pretty short of the benchmark duration, but we are working to move it longer. Just over the past quarter, that 4 to 5 year bucket increasing from 5% to 7%, so moving that longer strategically. The portfolio's earnings rate at quarter end was 1.22%. That's slowly moving higher as securities mature or are sold that had lower yields and are reinvested in the current interest rate environment. The portfolio is very high credit quality, the average rating AA. We do show S&P ratings, So all of the treasuries and federal agencies are rated AA+, which make up a majority of the assets in the portfolio. And you can see that in the upper right-hand corner. Again, over 90% in federal agencies and U.S. treasuries. We are working to diversify the portfolio. We did see a bit of an increase in the allocation to corporate notes during the quarter, adding some new issuers there. If we turn to the next page, just a repeat of what we saw earlier, but this time calculating the percentages without those CDs, but again, very similar to what we saw. So here's the activity, a summary of the activity in the portfolio. The left-hand side is a chart. It shows the different sectors where there was activity, activity being some maturities from the commercial paper and treasury sectors, as well as we sold some shorter treasuries and federal agencies. And we use the proceeds of those sales to reinvest this quarter in corporate notes, as well as U.S. treasuries. Increasing the corporate allocation by about 2.7 million and the treasury allocation by about 1.8 million. New purchases had maturities of 4 to 5 years and had interest rates of about 4.3 to 5.8%. So really locking in securities, those longer 4 to 5 year maturities at very, very attractive interest rates to benefit the district's portfolio moving forward, as these securities will pay high interest, for the next 4 or 5 years. When we look at kind of looking ahead, the last of the commercial paper did mature from the portfolio this quarter, and there are no more maturities until 2024. The portfolio does have a lot of callable federal agencies. We don't think it's likely they'll get called because the interest rates are much lower than current market rates. And so we will continue to look to sell securities to reinvest them out longer. That, of course, is done very thoughtfully, because when we do sell currently at a realized loss because the yields are so much lower than current market yields. So we certainly factor that in when making decisions, but we will still look to do that, kind of, taking that loss now to reinvest in much higher yielding securities to make up for that loss over the life of the new investments. So the next page is the performance. So earlier when we looked at the index performance, what we see here is quite similar. In the chart, we're showing the portfolio's performance in blue, the benchmark performance in gray, and then the portfolio performance net of PFM's fee in green. So if we look at the 3Q column here, you can see positive interest earned. That will always be positive, plus your change in value. So it was a positive change in market value for a total dollar return of $690,000. And that equates to a percentage return of 0.77%. So that's a very strong return for the quarter. You can see you outperformed your benchmark by a very strong margin. That has to do with, if you recall back to the index performance, federal agencies and corporates both outperformed treasuries. So that added to the performance. Also, the portfolio's average maturity is much shorter than the benchmark. So that benefited the portfolio during the most recent quarter, where we saw rates move a bit higher. And then we do show you the performance for the past 4 quarters. As of this quarter, we now have a 1-year return number. So starting with the next quarterly report, we will show that number as well. For the past year, the portfolio has done very well. It has earned about 2.5% for the past year versus the benchmark return of about 2.1%. So it's had good performance since inception of the portfolio. And then just lastly, I'm showing the earnings of the portfolio, but without the unrealized gains or losses, so just your realized earnings. So you have your interest earned that we saw, but then you also have any realized gains or losses on sales. So as I was mentioning a few slides ago, we did sell some securities this quarter. They did result in realized losses. But again, we weigh that when deciding to sell securities, realizing that loss, lowering your earnings a little bit for the current period, but by reinvesting in those 4.5 to 5.5% securities, that will increase your earnings over the life of the securities. And because this portfolio is a long-term portfolio, you're not peeling off interest earnings, taking it out of the portfolio. Everything kind of goes back into the portfolio. You are able to take that long-term approach and again, kind of give up some current period earnings to increase the earnings and the value of the portfolio over the long term. That's the last page I'll cover. The remainder of the report has all the details on the holdings and transactions. Just kind of in conclusion, looking ahead, the Fed does continue to fight inflation. We may see one more rate hike in 2023, but we're likely very near the peak of interest rates, particularly on that shorter end, 5 years and under, especially 3 years and under. We see growth in the economy still strong now, but that's really been driven by consumers, and we've seen credit card balances increase, so we may see the consumer kind of pull back, which would affect overall growth in the economy. And then other headwinds to growth do exist: increasing energy prices, high inflation, the geopolitical risks that we are experiencing around the globe. And then in the portfolio, what this means is that because we do think rates are kind of at their peak, we will continue to look to add those longer maturity securities, again, factoring in any realized losses in order to make that happen. And we will just look to carefully manage the risk in the portfolio to keep diversification high, and then, of course, to maintain the high credit quality in the portfolio. So I'll stop there, but can answer any additional questions you may have.
Like we're all good.
Yeah, right.
Wrong that.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank you. I just want to thank you for all the hard work you're doing, because this is not easy. And I wish I shared your optimism about rates are about as high as they're going to go. But I don't. And having lived through the 70s and 80s, a lot of the same factors in play. I thought I saw something about Japan, that they're no longer buying our treasuries, and China obviously hasn't been for a while. But Japan is the country that holds the most of all our treasuries, 1.3 trillion, more or less. And if it's a money squeeze that they don't have the money to invest, that's one thing. That tells me that currency is getting, supply is getting shorter in the world. But it may be more than that. Maybe they're losing some confidence in the U.S. And that lack of confidence in the world of the United States could drive interest rates quite high. So, but thank you for all the work you're doing.
Yes, thank you, Allison. Okay.
All right, thank you so much, Allison.
All right, thank you all. Have a good day.
You too. So moving on to the consent agenda.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Okay, Ricky, I'll second. Okay, Chris, would you take a vote? Oh, public comment on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, take a vote.
Division 1,
Yes?
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 2,
Aye.
Division 5,
Yes.
Division 3.
Aye. You're winning.
Over
The
there.
ayes win.
Ayes are winning.
Okay, general orders, I will start with the labor contract.
Thank you, President Hull. I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Jones. This is his baby, and just wanna congratulate him and Naomi on a
Yes.
long slog and a great job.
Yes.
Baby.
Got it done.
Baby.
3
I
years.
don't know if I'd call it a
That's
baby.
the next
Call it a
t-shirt.
baby.
Unencumbered and then long slog. and
Great job.
All right. T-shirts. Fair enough. Take it. Okay, so, thank you, Board. Greg Jones, Assistant General Manager. Bringing forth to you today, seeking adoption of Resolution 2023-48 for the ratification of an updated MOU starting January 1st, 2024, ending December 31, 2026. For the past several months, actually started, I want to say in early May, is when we began the conversations between NID, myself, Naomi, on the negotiating team with our legal counsel, as well as AFSCME representatives. Began a long and healthy conversation for up until the end of September, so very recent. We reached roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of 25, 26 tentative agreements along that way. Many were non-economic adjustments. Many were economic in nature adjustments to the district's relationship with our AFSCME union employees. And this is what we have in front of us today. I will go through a series of some changes. Well, what we're asking for, there still are some grammatical and minor adjustments that we're working through. We don't have it fully signed yet by the negotiating parties, so we're still working through some minor adjustments through the way. We have a couple I'll note to you today, and we may have a couple that are lingering that we're still finalizing. But in all, the majority of the substantive portions of the MOU are contained in these 25 pages. By the way, I'll note that this has been a complete rewrite of the MOU in general. You'll notice that there is no red line version and then a clean version in this packet. We went from a roughly 50-page MOU to a 25-page MOU. So we definitely removed certain sections, as noted in the staff report, and we cleaned up many of the sections to reflect, just general state law, some to reflect processes, a lot to reflect processes and procedures that NID just imparts. And it was according to many departments, including human resources, finance, accounting. There was a lot of inconsistencies within the previous MOUs over time. They were built upon each other. And so over time, once you start in 2006 or 7 and you don't do a substantive change in 15 or 20 years, you run into a lot of overlap. And that's what we had. And so it was time to completely rewrite. We had great assistance by AFSCME, their representative on the AFSCME staff, and then likewise the staff that were assisting. So we had a number of employees that were in these meetings as well that really assisted. And I want to thank them particularly for their assistance and moving through. We had Carl Cookson as the president of AFSCME. We have Matt Baker. We have Barbara, spacing on Barbara's last name, darn it. And then Ron Slavin is the AFSCME president or representative of AFSCME. So we had a really healthy conversation for the last number of months. So all culminated here. Starting with a couple adjustments that I would like to point out. Let's see, would that be the way to do it? Probably. I'll go to page 3 of the MOU.
I don't know that it's necessary to point out the typo.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we could.
Fair enough.
Yeah, right.
Fair enough. Okay. Sorry about that.
Possibly go through the table.
Yeah,
and
yep.
the major changes.
Right.
And they are consistent
Yep.
with what we have discussed in closed session. Any other changes are simply typo in nature. So we'll
Yep.
just take care of them.
Yep, sorry, that's a good point. All right, so, moving to, page 3 of the MOU. So,
Or the staff report.
I'm sorry, the staff report, page 2,
Thank you.
reflects Article 3, which begins page 3 of the MOU, which is the wages section. This section, was, I'm not gonna go through each one of these articles unless you'd like to, didn't intend for that. Wanted to go through some of the economic adjustments that we had, I think that's most pertinent. And then I'll come back to the final page of the staff report, which reflects on the budget impact of the district. So, here we have advanced a 6th salary step for all employees, all classifications, which will begin January 1, 2024. So currently, if you remember, we cap out at step 5. This advances a step 6 for all classifications. Step advancement to take place, let's see, so that's 3.1. So 3.2 references those step advancements. If anybody's at a step 5 currently, automatically in January 1, if they've been a step 5 for over a 12-month period, they'll ascend to a step 6 in January of 2024. If they are at a step 5, and they still have a performance evaluation coming due this year, so under a 12-month at step 5, once they reach their performance evaluation, then that step 6 will be contemplated if they're adequate for it. We have 3.3 denotes the COLA for the next 3 years. This is a 3-year MOU. So we have a 5% cost of living adjustment in January 1st of 2024, and effective January 1, 5, and then 26 fiscal year is a adjustment between a 2% and 5%, depending on CPI index based in the San Francisco Bay Area. So that is a range of a COLA, depending on what that will be. It'll be a minimum of 2%, it'll be a maximum of 5%.
That makes sense.
Yep.
I have a couple questions about the salary. Would you
Sure.
like me to hold questions until you're through?
Why don't we,
Ask as we go
No,
along?
why don't you ask as we go along? I think that'd be good.
So, I was curious on 3.3, what was the thinking around a 5%, salary increase? Because I remember when we did this 2 years ago, some salary increases were far more than 5%. I'm just curious, how did you arrive at the 5%, and is that representative of, puts us on parity with other agencies?
So you're mixing up two different words and nomenclatures. The
Yes.
5% on this 3.3 is based on a cost of living adjustment. What we did a couple years ago was a market
Yeah, that's kind of what I
adjustment.
thought this was.
And the board at the time had authorized everybody to bring up to a 5% of median based on a salary survey. That was not part of this analysis.
Okay, so that's what I was thinking, was that this first paragraph of everybody getting a 5% increase, was that 5% that we brought them? No.
So that's the
Nope.
COLA.
That's a cost of
So in
living.
order to address any market inequities,
Mhm.
instead of doing one-off or different market adjustments per
Mhm.
specification as was done in the last project,
Right.
which did create a lot of, some morale issues, there's a lot of haves and
I
have-nots.
heard about that, yeah.
So when we take a look at market issues and where we're under market, when you do a market study, you typically compare top step to top step.
Mhm.
And almost every comparable agency has 7 steps, and we only have 5 steps.
Right.
So you're oftentimes seeing, on average, that we are about 10% lower.
Uh-huh.
So instead of adding the full 7 steps, due to financial considerations, we decided to just add 1 step this time and then take consideration of an additional 7 steps during the next round of negotiations.
If I remember right, like, everyone gets that step right away, right?
No,
Is
the
it
only
within the
people that
first
are
12 months?
currently at step 5
Yeah.
will get to the step 6 upon execution of the agreement.
Mhm.
Other folks will then be required to go through the normal years of service process and meeting their.
Correct. What I meant is the people that were capped out.
Yes, yes.
they're gonna get, was it 5%?
So they will get the 5% COLA and they'll get the 6th step.
All of our steps based on 1 through 5, now 1 through 6, are all a 5%.
Yeah, it's like 5, so they're getting 5 plus 5 plus 2 to 5 plus 2 to 5 over the next 3 years.
That's right.
So this will start to
correct.
take away some of the market inequities that we've been having that are causing a lot of issue.
Well, that was my final question was, once this is adopted, should it be, how does this compare us to our neighbors, our
We're
neighboring
still
agencies?
low, but we're getting better. One of our challenges is that our market is, we lose people to Yuba Water Agency,
Right.
CWA,
Right.
EG&E.
Genie.
We are still a little bit higher than probably Nevada County and Grass Valley, but Grass Valley is to be expected. They're a very small agency in comparison to other cities.
Right.
In the Placer County area, we're still a little bit low. This doesn't bring us to market or right to parity, but it's getting us closer. I think if we're able to, depending on finances and what's going on with the economy during the next round of negotiations, if we're able to add that 7th step, it should do a lot to close that gap.
But you also have to be careful with market surveys.
I know.
Not all market surveys are equal,
That carried
No.
right? And you're either looking at just cost or total benefits.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes it's very difficult. It is extremely difficult to get a market survey that is worth its salt. In this industry, if you recall, I believe the last market survey that we did had roughly 16 or 15 different agencies that we compared against.
It had a lot that we couldn't compare to.
That's right.
There was a lot of just plain old holes in it.
Which led back to the haves and have-nots
Yeah.
conversation between staff and the morale problems.
Yeah.
It caused issues. And through this process this year, we are not focusing on and banking our whole process on a market-based survey.
It also addresses one of the other requests we often get and where we do fall short in comparison to comparable agencies, is that we don't offer longevity pay. So this
Right.
does allow for
Right.
some acknowledgement of years of service for those that have been capped out for a long time, which should help morale somewhat.
Thank you.
Questions at this point? Okay. So that's the COLA. We did add a Class A pay, Class A. So any utility worker 1, 2, and this is very targeted to the maintenance utility worker 1, 2 role and classification. They will receive 75 cents per hour for the possession of a valid Class A driver's license. This is an operational issue that we continuously run into problems with, and so this was a great, we thought, a good opportunity to offer an additional financial incentives to staff to take that extra leap, to gain more experience, gain more knowledge, be more, useful when we need it.
On that subject, I remember this discussion is very much in favor of it. How much does the district help with the person getting that license, i.e. provide the truck, provide the
All of it.
all of it?
Yeah.
Train them.
This is a common issue in most agencies, is the lack of willingness of employees to get Class A licenses. I think in part it's due to the increased legal responsibility that they have. And what happens is that we run into an issue with succession planning, because the next classification up requires a Class A license to become an operator. So we try to do, really try to be supportive in folks getting their Class A license. But I did feel that was necessary specifically for succession planning and having folks that can drive Class A vehicles and equipment, to offer this certification pay as an encouragement.
Is it enough?
This is one of those things where we're gonna have to reserve the right to revisit, and if it's not a good enough carrot, we'll have to think ourselves. But I think it's a good starting
I
point.
mean,
It's very important and beneficial to the district to have those, having gone through the process myself and having to go to get the medical certificate and study for the test and have that stuff all, it's not a small thing.
It's not.
It needs some sort of incentive, I think.
And this is a struggle most agencies have. I've experienced this before.
every agency has it.
Yeah.
In fact, when I meet somebody who has a Class A, I ask them, do you want to relocate?
Right.
Does the insurance company then require them to random drug test?
Actually, DOT requires it. It's a federal
Yeah.
requirement, so.
And that's something we wouldn't do as an agency unless they had a Class A, or they're doing that anyway?
So when you have a Class A, you get your golden ticket pulled through the School Service, DATCO, and that is a DOT requirement. Other drug testing is completed upon when you're hired. There are gonna be some modifications in the drug testing laws, that go into place January 1st, 2024, and that has to do with testing for cannabis. You have to have a test that has active cannabis as opposed to
Yeah, that was gonna be my follow-up.
residual cannabis. So we are working with our drug testing company to ensure that we meet those new legal requirements. But we've been in contact with them for well over a year now, so I think we should be all set up. And then we have a reasonable suspicion program. So if anybody gets in an accident, if there's significant damage to the vehicle or equipment, or bodily damage, or other conditions, we go off a reasonable suspicion, whether or not they need to be drug tested.
Yeah, I've just seen a reluctance of people wanting Class A because of the random test.
And I do believe that it is a lot of that, but the new laws that go into effect in the state of California on January 1st, 2024, do not apply to Class A drivers. So that is a lot of times what the concern is.
Yeah.
Could we go back to 3.3 for a second? So my understanding is that we may have some employees that the market survey said were fairly significantly under market. And I'm wondering how will this adjustment address that, or are we going to look separately at those employees where the salary discrepancy via the survey showed a big difference? Or are we saying that we don't have confidence in the survey? So I was wondering how we're gonna address that.
It's a little bit of both. Some of you have to almost look at it on a one-by-one situation, because some of the issues come into the fact that some current classifications aren't familied, so they don't have a 1-2 senior series, which is really good for promoting succession planning, professional growth, all those things. Some of the salary issues are related to that. So people, they're stuck in a classification that has no family, it is what it is, and it's a real niche kind of specification, so there isn't a lot of movement opportunity. Those we deal with on one-off. If we are aware of a specific classification that is extremely low, and especially if it's causing us retention issues, or we are trying to give that classification or specification more responsibility, then we will bring it as a one-off. And when we do that, we go back and we do basically another market survey. The challenge with market surveys is they're about as good as the day that you do them, because everybody's changing salaries all the time. So we will, as needed, come back and look on one-off basis. The market survey has some challenges from the perspective that our job classifications, specifications often have different titles or different job responsibilities than comparable agencies. So we will use that to kind of flag specific issues and then go back and do a deeper dive. We didn't want to exacerbate the morale issues between the haves and have-nots this year. And in large, if we had 7 steps and we were comparing out a 7-step to a 7-step, we would take care of a lot of the market issues. So I do think that this is a well-founded strategy in trying to take a bite out of this issue without causing too much financial distress to the district.
We're working towards it.
We're working towards it. And you have to watch retention, what's going on with the economy, all this. You have to look at all these factors and then try to come up with something that is reasonable, but also in recognition that a lot of the positions are under market, and try to address that issue.
And if I were in the category and consider myself a have-not, I'd be looking at every avenue to become a have.
Right, and it's hard.
It's a two-way street.
It is, and some of it can be challenging, and it does cause a lot of retention issues in specific departments when there's constantly a one-way street out of the department to the departments that may have more favorably paid positions.
What is our retention rate?
I don't know off the top of my head. It usually runs around 11-12%. A lot of times what will happen is, we'll lose some of the higher positions out of Hydro, PG&E, Yuba, PCWA, and then, you know, it just, or out of operations, and then it's a trickle through, they leave maintenance, come over. You know, that seems to be the route of the door out.
What is
But
the,
that's not a bad retention rate. I mean,
And I'm just saying off the top of my head. It was pretty concerning for a while. There was a huge flux of people leaving. Then you start seeing people come back. Now we're starting to see some resignations kick up. You always kind of have this roller coaster. I'd have to go back and have it calculated again. I just don't know off the top of my head what it is today.
well, I would be interested to know.
I can get that
FYI.
information for
They're
sure.
working towards it,
Yeah.
use it.
You know, and the other thing I appreciate in this whole area is your work on the climate assessment. I think that, if you look at surveys about employee satisfaction and reasons for leaving, money is certainly a factor, but it is not the top factor by any means. And having a positive relationship with your boss is number one, and having a positive work environment generally, it always rates higher than money. And how your colleagues, you interact with them. So, I think that climate assessment mirrored with a salary program like this is a really positive step for the district, and I think you've laid a great foundation.
Well, that also goes to the new strategic plan goals, right?
Right.
Employee satisfaction, so
Yeah.
we're working on some of those too.
what have you explained, I'm confused about this 11% retention rate. What does that mean? I would expect it to be 89%.
No, it's just opposite. We
It's
should
just
pay
the-
attention. It should,
Turnover.
the leaving rate.
So that's leaving rate, okay, that makes.
Does that include retirees, that
Yeah.
11%?
Yeah.
Yeah, but don't quote me on that 11%.
Okay, but
I'm
we'll
gonna make
just
that
pretend
number.
that
It was, last time we did this, it
thought it wasn't
was
around.
about 11.
That's what I thought too.
We, my history is somewhere around 10 is a pretty healthy company.
Yeah, it's fairly healthy. We see a lot of the folks that leave, you know, some of them are families. It seems folks with families, and they have ends to meet with children, and expenses higher. They'll leave for money. Other people, you know, you're right, people leave bad bosses, right?
And is that per year?
Well, it's just a rolling average. You can calculate it on a specific annual basis.
Good job.
Yeah.
Okay, so, with some of the gives in terms of financial, we got some gets, right? And so 3.7, 3.8, 3.9 are some of those, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9 are some of those areas where we were seeing some runaway costs going on for out-of-class pay. Et cetera. So there's some, minimum of 40-hour consecutive work in some of these, now out-of-class pay. Sometimes it would be a little, within a day or two of somebody taking a holiday or sick, and then there was an out-of-class pay. So we're sort of shoring this up as in terms of operationally. Remote pay is one of those other items that we put into this particular MOU, and this is if you're remote and you get called, if you just have to answer a phone call or log in and it takes you only 15 minutes, you don't log 3 hours worth of time, right? So it's kind of a way to shore up. It wasn't a huge consideration, it wasn't a big issue, but it was getting to the point where we needed to put something in writing and ensure that expense classification.
So somebody's working remote and they get.
I'm sorry,
This is for folks
this
that
is
are on standby pay, so we have
standby.
certain,
Which is down below.
yeah, so we have certain staff
Yep.
that is assigned to be basically on call. They get a daily stipend for being on call, and then if they get called out for an overtime call, it's basically a 3-hour minimum, unless the work can be completed at home in less than 30 minutes. And so where this comes into play is if somebody gets a call for an alarm from the SCADA system, and it's as simple as hitting the button off, then they get a 30-minute minimum. And so this will apply to standby. And then in some cases, there are folks that are not on standby that are also in the alarm phone tree, and so they could also get the random call, and so that would also apply to them.
Yeah, because I didn't understand the concept.
Okay, we'll take a
Yeah.
look and see if there's any words.
The name might be a little, the name's a little,
You can get paid for both. You can get
Right.
standby and remote pay.
Because really, the standby pay is just like a stipend. I
Yeah.
mean, it's,
The standby pay is for you are within a reasonable distance, you
Yeah.
can respond in a timely manner, you are not drinking alcohol. That's a big one.
you are available to
You are available,
respond.
sound mind and body,
Yeah.
right.
to respond.
So how many employees are on standby? I assume this is after regular work hours and then weekends?
Yeah, it depends on the department. Some departments, we run 24 hours or 7-day-a-week staffing, so then in operations specifically, so those folks, they're only on standby from like close of business till the next morning. In hydro, it just depends. Some people are on standby, all 7 days of the week.
I can imagine it could be a large number.
No, it's not that large.
That large.
Yeah, hydro only has one and off has two, right?
We have 2 treatment, 2 distribution.
Yeah,
Yeah.
4.
So like I said, it's not that big of
Yeah.
consideration. However, it was something we made sure we wanted to put into this particular MOU.
Yeah.
So if we go, let's see, a little bit further, Article 6, sick leave, we've noted that we have, so sick leave is its own sort of generally similar language as it was in this existing MOU as today. However, we've reached out to CalPERS and we've reached out to actuarials to see if there's a sick conversion opportunity within the CalPERS system and what that would be.
Yeah, that's specifically to address, there's been a long-standing condition in the former MOUs for payout of sick leave upon separation, and there is no cap on sick leave accrual. And so this can result in some very hefty payments from the district when people retire or otherwise leave. So one method that you can employ to address that issue, to be able to bargain, to put a cap on, is to have sick leave conversion added to your contract with CalPERS for pension. So essentially, you get a prorated share of PERS credits, service credits, based on the numbers of sick leave. It's a little bit complicated because it does increase your costs for the employer contribution for pension, as well as your unfunded liability. So we just got that actuarial valuation back from CalPERS, so we're gonna go through an analysis and essentially make a determination what is more beneficial to the district. It depends on what retiree you talk to. Some people like the big cash payment, but raises your taxes and it gets taxed very heavily, versus have more CalPERS credits. So we will kind of report back on that, so it's going to stay as is for now until we work through that analysis. It took CalPERS a long time to do the valuation.
That's why you have the reopener, right?
Yep, that's why we have a
yeah.
reopener on it. So, reopener just allows us to essentially carve this piece out and remarket it without opening the whole document.
Yeah.
And that would allow us to place a cap.
Yep.
There's some people, I won't name who they are, but one of them may be sitting in this room who has piles and piles of sick leave and can take all of us on a cruise together. Board meeting, celebration, upcoming retirement.
I think it's over that corner somewhere.
That you are.
Wow.
So, let's see, moving on, holidays, which is the next page, page 7, Article 7. What we did is we actually removed,
We removed Columbus Day and made it into
Columbus
a
Day.
floating holiday, and this addressed another issue that we have is folks are on an alternative work schedule. So for example, they work a 980 or a 410 schedule. Holidays are only paid on an 8-hour basis for equity purposes, because there's a monetary value to those hours.
Right.
And so they are required to use a different pot at least to supplement their holiday pay, so that they get a full 9 or 10 hours of pay for that holiday day. So allowing for another floating holiday in lieu of having Columbus Day, kind of allows them to have a bank that addresses a lot of that issue.
It's a good idea.
skipping forward a little bit, Article 12, page 9, we've got vacation article here. We did adjust some of the vacation accrual status, and we actually bumped the hours up, so you are an employee that starts tomorrow is actually gaining more vacation hours quicker than waiting for 4 years. At the time, it was about a 4-year wait period. So we got rid of the top level of, I think it was less than 3.692 hours of accrual in the first 4 years. So we bumped that to the next level. So people are accruing vacation at a quicker rate than they would have already.
We had a couple too many leveling steps in our vacation schedule, so we just kind of pulled it out a little bit.
So with that, we have capped vacation. And although we're giving more accrual quicker, we are hoping that people will use their vacation more often. So we have a cap, and we'll be paying out anything
The cap was
above
just reduced.
cap. Yeah.
So the pay
What was
period,
the previous cap, 4?
Well, it was, you
Oh.
couldn't accrue it over 420 hours or something like that.
The issue with a leave accrual on the books is it is liability.
It's your balance
It's an
sheet.
accrued liability that then impacts your fund, negatively impacts your fund balance.
right.
So it's to our benefit that people use their vacation because it is a vested right and you owe them the money no matter what. So having a lower cap reduces the accrued liability, which is healthier for the fund balance, and it encourages people to actually use their vacation, which is good for them.
So I have a question about Article 12, when it says, so it gives the hours accrued, and it says per pay period. Are most people, are they once a month?
It's every other Friday.
Okay, so they get 2 paychecks,
Yeah.
so presumably they get
There's 2 months in which
a
you
day
get
a
3
month.
payments.
Sometimes
a
3.
day a month is kind of what
26
works out.
in a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's 26 paychecks in a year.
Okay, well, I just wasn't sure, because some of us get a paycheck once a month.
That's right.
I wasn't
Work for the
certain.
state, yeah.
Some of us don't get paid at all.
Right. Don't get paid when you.
That's
right.
Mandarins.
Mandarins.
You get,
Or
Mandarins.
pumpkin.
And butternut squash, I've been
Or
seeing
pumpkin.
butternut squash.
Or flowers.
you get paid once a year?
Can you crop from our?
Oh, okay.
So is it fair to say that when this gets enacted, there's some number of employees with up to 70 hours that are gonna get a check?
Yeah, so we will, whenever you implement a cap, you always get into this mess.
Yeah.
With, it happens every time, and it's a bigger pain than you would think.
Yeah.
But you get into this mess where people are at their cap, and so then, they're automatically still accruing because of the normal accrual schedule. So you basically buy them down, and then they can set the cap, so they get.
So do we know what the liability is?
I don't know. For me, it's not a horribly big concern, because we owe them the money no matter what, and I prefer to pay a little bit out every year in payments.
Yeah.
But I could calculate that. We'll report back on that. We did calculate, I just don't recall off the top of my head.
Yeah.
It wasn't a pile of money, it doesn't require a budget amendment, but I'll report back.
Yeah, we've, in the tech world, we're adopting unlimited vacation to get it all off the books, which I'm not really sure that I like it one way or the other, but one thing that we found is that people take less vacation.
Right.
Like, you just work it out with your manager, and, yeah, I think I was, prior to implementing that, was getting like 6 weeks a year. I'm probably taking 4. Yeah. So it's a net benefit to the company, not to the employees. So I'm not sure how I feel about it. That seems to be where tech's going.
Yeah, there's a lot of changes going on, being more flexible, having alternate work schedules, vacation policies, sick leave policies. So it's something definitely to watch out over the next year.
Yes.
Any further questions?
No?
We can skip ahead to page 10, Article 14. This was one of the biggest changes that was discussed with staff and with the union over this period of time. And it really reflects the removal of the HRA package that NID has had for quite some time, since
Haven't
2009.
people have balances in their HRA?
They still have those.
They keep
Those are theirs. Those balances still live.
They'll spend their balances?
That money is.
Those are theirs.
So that.
Oh,
That money is theirs until it's spent.
Or they leave, and if they leave, they have a year within to spend it. They became
Okay,
a
was just
retiree,
curious.
then it gets converted to a
Yep, no,
retiree.
that's still,
so it's a benefit that doesn't go away, it's just that you're not gonna do it anymore.
you're not a,
Yeah, we had a lot of issues with the HRA. So under the existing program, there is a sliding amount that people get in their HRA depending on what health plan, what health category they're in and what health plan. So an employee only was getting a very large sum of money into their HRA that they could accrue until they hit the HRA cap, which said that employee only was $4,000. What was happening is that employee onlys were getting an unreasonable amount of money in comparison to other categories that are paying out of pocket for health insurance. And it came to our attention that there was probably some misuse of this fund going on that was outside of what the intention of the money was for. So the money's for health benefits, but people were using it for gym payments and Pelotons and, yes, so. Yeah, and it's just ripe for fraud. And so, there's a lot of concern related to the fraud issue. With that said, we also wanted to make things more equitable for the employee plus one and employee family. So we essentially redistributed the funds so that just nobody is really going out of pocket, but it did hit the employee-only group more. That change hit them a lot more than anybody else. So it has caused some morale issues. But it was just at a point where it was not sustainable for the, it was also meeting the purpose of what the purpose of the program was, and that was to provide health insurance, not to pay gym memberships and Pelotons and some of those things.
Does the district, manage that?
No, we use a third-party administrator, and so because of some of the significant, because it's not just tax fraud, it's basically a felony, because you're also, it's fraud against the district, because if you're utilizing the money, things that you maybe shouldn't be, or buying things and reselling them, or whatever they are, you know, it's a real serious offense. And so if we were going to keep the program, we were almost getting put in the position of having to bring it in-house so that we could monitor the fraud portion a little bit more. So in order to address that issue, in order to address the inequity between the groups, in order to understate the, what the purpose of the benefit is to provide health insurance. It's not for all these ancillary benefits. We made the hard decision to modify it, and it hasn't gone over well with all staff. But I do think it was a warranted change.
And what is cafeteria plan? I couldn't understand
Cafeteria plan
what
is
that
just
means.
it all has to do with IRS.
Yeah.
It is the method by which you don't have to pay like fringe benefits on benefit packages. A cafeteria just means it's one or more benefit in the package, so that's why you see it written.
Pick and choose, this one and that one.
Yeah.
It's a PERS requirement.
Yeah, I understand the word cafeteria, but I didn't understand how it applied, because, you know, somewhere in here it says you're removing the HRA in favor of a cafeteria plan, and I didn't quite understand
It's all
the
IRS
nexus.
tax rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
just
all
putting-
differences in how the IRS tax rules are, because there is also some additional concern on the tax issues related with how the HRA was being administered. So some folks could be subject to additional taxes because it can be considered wages with the way the payments go in and out. So the term cafeteria plan is a different connotation under the tax code, and it allows us to more straightforward do what we're trying to do.
And it's just a language nomenclature as well with CalPERS. I mean, when
Yeah.
they understand the cafeteria plan process is what we needed to see. So it's just an example of so many of the things in this MOU that was changed in order to be accurate with federal, state laws and processes.
Justin?
Greg, I'm wondering if there's a typo here.
There is.
Probably.
Yeah, that's, isn't this old?
Where?
Isn't this old where the notes haven't been fixed to the?
That's right.
Yeah,
It's a
so
typo.
employee plus one, total benefit should be note 4.
Correct.
And employee
Yeah.
plus family should be note 5.
Yep, that is correct. Yep,
That was.
and those will be adjusted.
Being brought to our attention.
Yep, exactly.
Pretty big deal.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, that is definitely, those are, instead of the last column, note 3, note 3, note 3, it's note 3, note 4, note 5, going down the line.
These things are really, really confusing. The HRA, the FSA, if you have one, what it limits you on the other side, like,
It is insane,
I can't figure it out, and I sit with the HR people every year.
So HRA and FSA are different, and HRA
They are different.
can be an FSA, an FSA can be an HRA. And it all depends on how the in and out of the money flows. So the difference is whether or not the money hits your W-2 as income, and then you make the pre-tax contribution, or if it's a direct contribution, and then how those premiums are paid. There's a lot of issues going on with how we were.
Really hard to understand. I'm sure the employees get confused here.
1,000% gets confused, and we have.
I'm confused.
We have had to, we've had to get legal opinions. The primary I've said the two primary reasons why we're changing this is to have more equity in actual providing health insurance benefits, to reduce any potential for fraud moving forward with the HRA expenditures, also to shore up consistency with the IRS tax.
Okay, maybe that's helpful. I assume it will be.
It is going to be much more straightforward.
Yep.
Good.
Let's see, so, thank you, Dustin, for that clarification. There's a couple other, high-level items. The document is a 3-year plan, so we anticipate not going back to the negotiating table until sometime in May of 2026. So that is a huge savings, you know. There's a fine line between how quickly you want this plan to end and sunset, versus how long you want it to go, you know. So 3 years is about right for where we are. Some organizations, and we have done a 1-year extension at times. Some organizations do a 5-year MOU, then things get stale in that time period. So we think 3 years is the right number for now. So that's really good. One or two other items. The list of employees, we erroneously left off the customer service administrator. That position will be put back on to Appendix 5. We are going to be removing Appendix B from the MOU, and the Appendix B, as you can see, is blank. Mm-hmm. It is the salary schedule. That salary schedule is required by law to be updated annually. Mm-hmm. And so we do update that salary schedule annually. The MOU states that salary schedule will have a 6th step within it. When it comes back to the board for approval for 2024, you will see that 6th step in there. So by decoupling it specifically from the MOU, as a document, we don't have to bring the MOU itself back every time. So that.
Well,
yeah.
So these new salaries with the 5% and so on, is that reflected in the budget that we just went through?
Yep.
That's right.
And the other bonus in having 3 years is you have a good planning tool,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think a 3-year is a really good contract.
I think it is too.
Bargaining's always difficult.
And time consuming and expensive.
Yeah, and we went through a wholesale change, so that was especially
Yeah.
50 pages to 20.
Yeah, it took a little bit more effort. All the items that were removed are management rights items that are better captured in administrative policy or in a board policy. The other item, and I don't know, did we mention this, that we did combine these 3 groups into one?
Right.
I saw that.
There's no reason for the 3
I always
MOUs.
wondered that.
And whenever you have 3 areas where you need to change something, it's just ripe for issues.
Yep.
So we just combined them into one.
Yeah.
Hey, Trevor?
Is there something glaring that the employees or the labor negotiators asked for that they didn't get that you anticipate being a morale issue?
The HRA, that's one. Yeah, that's probably the biggest one for sure, but it's with a select group of people. There's always issues with longevity. They ask for longevity every single time.
What does that mean?
Longevity is simply a raise you get when you've been at an agency for a certain period of time. I've never been a huge fan of longevity. I think that it undercuts, paying for performance.
And take a look at our US senators.
There's that issue.
Look at tenure, right?
Yeah, you know, there's positives and negatives to it. What else was the big one?
Trying to think.
There was something else we increased the boot allowance
I
quite a
saw
bit.
that. That was
We
big.
have a huge boot. Boots is always a problem.
Shoes are important.
Yeah.
Well, and work boots are super expensive.
Yeah.
Right.
And they are very, very hard on them. And it's very important to me that they have good footwear when they're working in the conditions that they're working in. So we increased that. What was the other thing? It was longevity and,
There was a handful of requests that
there's a,
we definitely worked with them on. I can't.
there was a couple of requests to give, for example, supervisor level people, increased pay or.
Well, it was an additional staff, and we have the.
Yeah, not anyone else. We really try to not give great haves and have-nots. We decline that one.
So outside of longevity and the HRA, they walked away from the table pretty happy?
I would think that without the HRA issue, they would have been very happy.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was the biggest issue.
Yeah, it was a big issue because, you know, there are folks that are able to leverage the HRA to their benefit, and they're no longer going to be able to. But there was a lot more, you know, it wasn't a matter of we want to take something away from a group of people. It was a consideration of legal risk, equity, and what the purpose of the benefits were for.
Yeah.
I support all of that. I am in favor of some sort of stipend or mechanism to pay for gym memberships.
And I don't have an opposition to that. The problem was it was just employee only, right?
Yeah, I think that maybe it needs to be thought through, but maybe, you know, going in the future.
A wellness program.
Yeah.
Wellness
Yeah,
programs are not a bad thing. I've always
Saves you
had
on
this,
the healthcare side of things.
want to think about how to do that. Part of the problem is CalPERS doesn't have a good, program for having reduced health benefits through CalPERS.
Right.
Because that's who we purchase them through, due to wellness, but wellness, healthy employees make for good employees. So I don't disagree with that at all. It could be something we need to look into.
Trevor, when you get,
Do they not have a wellness, coefficient or part in their current health insurance?
No, I think under CalPERS, you probably just have a, lack of wellness penalty that you pay on premiums.
Because I always liked that one in my health insurance, you know.
You see private companies go, I mean, a lot of private companies, if you average 10,000 steps a year, you pay
Yeah.
5,000, 5% less on your healthcare premium or whatever it is.
and you get old enough, you can be in the silver sneakers.
I'm
So
getting close.
There's almost nobody here that honors that anymore.
I don't know what it is.
Well,
Nicely done.
think
The
that
Medicare thing.
Yeah, thanks.
Supplement the.
So if there's any questions, just the budgetary impact, I'll just overview what that is. I noticed that, so 3-year term, additional 6 steps to all employee classifications, disregard the if applicable, that is a typo. COLA in year 1, range COLA in years 2 and 3, food allowance, as Jen just mentioned, and then this HRA discontinuance were sort of the overall large elements. You can see here the fiscal cost to the district over the 3-year period. And, this is baseline cost, what we're paying currently, that's column 1. Baseline cost, or column 2, is the projected year-end with the MOU and baseline cost. So that column 3 is the projected year-over-year, what this MOU costs the district on an annual basis, and then the cumulative 3-year cost of this MOU for these employees. There's roughly 169 employees associated with this MOU. Those are our representatives. I
wanted to make a comment about that, or an observation, because some years ago, we had in the close to 173, 75, somewhere in that. And so this is really a significant, a material drop in the number of FTEs. And I was curious what that is about. Do we have more positions that are just unfilled at the moment?
the management in that number.
I think that the numbers weren't correct.
Oh, okay.
And we have reduced staffing over time.
I knew you had.
But I wouldn't I don't know about the previous number, how correct it was.
Okay,
And you might be thinking of total district versus
yeah, I was,
those that are specifically to this,
yeah,
MOU.
okay, great.
You know, I was wondering too, the information about this contract will go out in the community.
Right.
And so I'm wondering how we present this as a positive, that we are working to retain our employees, that we, this is a strategic priority, because it's always a shame when you hear out, oh, well, they got, mega bucks, and it's like, what? They just got what they deserved, and that helps us to retain our good staff.
Right.
From my experience, that will happen no matter.
No matter
what you do.
No matter what.
So I just kind of,
Let it roll off.
yeah, and address it as it comes in.
Especially as we get rate increases, then the.
Retention of employees is always going to be less expensive than rehiring
Boy, that's,
for that position. So, yeah, I'm with Jennifer, that there's always going to be the naysayer of, oh, boy. But, the market is the market, and we're not only competing with just the neighboring public agencies that are sister agencies, but the private sector as well, so.
We're competing with minimum wage hikes, we're competing with
Fast food.
That's right.
There are some significant things that we compete with.
Remote jobs.
Remote jobs, the inability to provide bonuses, those types of things that if you go to the private side, you can. And there's always gonna be a certain specific section of the public that does not like public employees. And if they have legitimate concerns and want to talk about, we're happy to talk about it. I don't tend to worry too much about it, happens regardless.
Well, I think we've made tremendous progress in this contract, and even though there were weaknesses in the last contract, it did result in a lot of salary increases for the staff.
Yep.
And I think both steps were hugely important, and I really like to see that sixth step, because I think we have to, if we want longevity, we have to have a bigger range for people to be able to move in over time. And I would just make the issue of turnover and retention. There is, as you pointed out, there's a healthy benefit to that of people migrating out at a lower rate, if it creates opportunities for others to move up. So I really commend the amount of effort that it takes to make the narrative changes that you did and clean up the policy and practices interaction with the MOU. So you did a really good job, and thanks to HR,
Yeah, Naomi was a huge help. So the game changer this year was GovInvest. So that's our new.
Which what?
It's called GovInvest. It's our new salary.
Oh, yes, yeah.
I showed you that.
Yeah,
That is an absolute game changer. So that gives you some confidence in the numbers, and we can then upload directly to the budget. So it is a complete game changer. When we went into this, my real goal was to get that seventh step. We just couldn't afford it. So we gotta still be fiscally responsible. But I fully believe in trying to keep staffing levels low and having A+ students. So to do that, you have to be cognizant of what you're paying.
It gets back to Rutter in his statement. If you think what we do is expensive, try hiring an amateur.
Yeah.
It just doubles the cost.
Yeah.
Right.
And this will keep things down and much more efficient.
Well, appreciate the accolades, however, the real effort was made for the staff that was in the negotiating table.
Oh, and that's painful for
Carl, Wayne,
Barbara.
Matt, and Barbara. They had to go out and talk to the staff about it. They were put in some tough positions.
They got really beat up.
For a long time.
They should be commended
So
for
I
dedication.
really thank them and their efforts on this as well.
Agree.
Well, thank you.
I should ask them my question.
Yeah, they're not gonna, they're so done with it, they won't even. They got pretty beat up, which is normal, unfortunately. You're never gonna make everyone happy, but they hung in there, and they had some really good input, and they stuck in there, and they were.
And it was a pleasurable experience.
Good.
Some of these negotiations, I think, at certain agencies, it can be extremely contentious.
Yeah.
For a long time. This was a engaging and pleasure, I mean, we had great conversations. Some of them got pretty deep, and often they were really nice, so.
And they pointed out, there were
Yeah.
some things we would kind of get stuck on, or I personally would get stuck on, and, I was thankful to the staff around here who would come in and share their concerns directly with me, so that I could have the opportunity to hash it out with them. Because they, there were some valid points, I'm certainly not always
Yeah.
right, we know that.
Yeah, and they brought a lot of history,
Yeah.
to the table when we needed it.
And what about our labor council? Who did that end up being?
That question
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
We utilized Liberty Cassidy Whitmore, and we had he was one of their top negotiators in Northern California that goes to various agencies, and he represents LCW, who represents us, for these labor negotiations.
I had worked with him in Lincoln, he's really.
He was excellent.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
So the
excellent.
former firm was no longer, I can't
We don't
remember
use
the
them.
firm name.
Jackson Lewis, we
Yeah.
don't utilize
Oh,
Jackson.
good.
No,
Okay.
this was a different,
So a good,
new firm, new individual who was extraordinary,
yeah,
No,
that's great.
very helpful.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm really happy for everybody that worked out.
okay, so if we do not have any other comments or
Well, do we have a vote on a,
Yeah, we were asking for a
resolution?
vote.
We're at.
Oh, well, I was gonna ask for public comment.
Or a
Yeah, go
motion.
ahead.
May I ask for public comment? Anybody out there like to make a public comment? Okay, seeing none, I do see Lisa Price online, and Lisa, I want to say thank you for your work. Naomi.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I'll make a motion that we adopt resolution number 2023-48, authorizing the ratification of the 2024-2026 memorandum of understanding between the Nevada Irrigation District and the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Local 146 AFL-CIO, authorizing changes in wages, hours, terms, and conditions of employment for represented employees, and authorize the general manager to execute all necessary documentation and make minor grammatical adjustments as needed.
I would second that with, you've mentioned AFL-CIO, and it's actually AFSCME,
Oh.
if we make that one change.
I'm not certain that's true.
Is that not true?
No, AFSCME is their,
Right, but is it AFL-CIO? Because I didn't see that. This all says American Federation.
it's their,
Ask me, local 146. I have no idea what they asked.
okay,
Yeah.
all right, we can remove the AFL-CIO. I just removed that.
Okay, great.
As-
I will second.
Okay, yeah.
Division one,
Aye.
Oh, yes.
Division two,
Aye.
Division four,
Aye.
Division five,
Aye, aye, aye.
Division three.
Hi.
Well done, Carol.
Just a quick side note as next step, so what you will see next related to this particular MOU is when we come with our annual request for approval for the salary schedule, which is required by CalPERS.
Right.
See that reflected in there. And then we will bring the unrepresented benefits and compensation plan, but we plan on mirroring.
Yeah.
Kind of take one at a time, so we know where we're at.
okay,
Great.
perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we want to take a 5-minute stretch break?
Yes,
Okay, I hear, please, yes. Okay, we have our item 6B on fleet management, so an excellent, presentation here, and Steve is gonna launch us.
I'll introduce it. Good morning, honorable board. My name is Steve Prosser, Director of Maintenance.
Okay.
Today we'll be presenting a workshop on fleet maintenance, specifically addressing current and upcoming regulations that will impact our day-to-day operations. I'm pleased to introduce Jonathan Hoover, who's our equipment mechanic supervisor and oversees our fleet department. We'll be providing this workshop to you. And in the audience is our maintenance superintendent, Cameron Price, who's also our resource in our recently adopted CARB regulations. and those upcoming, conditions that we will need to satisfy. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. And welcome, Jonathan.
Ready? Good morning. As I said, my name is Jonathan Hoover. I've been with the district about 5 years. I'm a mechanic for a couple of years, and going on 3 years is the supervisor. I run the shop and handle most things fleet. So I'm going to attempt to get through this today, because I usually just fix trucks, not talk, so. So.
Can we move the microphone?
Yeah.
That one, this one we can't. That one picks up.
Okay. Ready? All right, so fleet management. All right, so basic overview, we're gonna review some new CARB regulations, and how NID is evaluating, preparing for the future in all areas of fleet management. Just for the sake of explanation, CARB is California Air Resources Board. If you're not aware, they basically set all the regulations that pertain to smog and not even just vehicles, but pollution from industrial, whatever. CARB handles all of that, so they set all these regulations. I would say the main purpose of this workshop is to make the board aware of upcoming regulations and some current regulations that have a potential for significant economic impact on the district, as well as discuss briefly how these regulations are changing how we address fleet replacement, and then some changes we have made in-house into how we determine and score vehicles for fleet replacement. So a few of the regulations we're going to go over are Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation, or AFCR. That covers basically all of our on-road trucks. Small Off-Road Engine Regulation, or SOAR, which is basically, think landscape equipment. Portable Equipment Registration Program is PERP regulation, and Portable Engine Airborne Toxic Control Measure, or ATCM, is towable diesel-powered equipment, generators and compressors and things like that. And then the in-use off-road diesel-fueled fleets regulation, or the off-road regulation, is any self-propelled off-road equipment. So this first one we're going to go over is ACFR, or the Advanced Clean Fleets Regulation. This is the regulation that will probably have the biggest impact on the district currently. I know that most of you are probably aware that the state has mandated that auto manufacturers sell only electric vehicles starting around 2035. What CARB has done is they're going after certain entities sooner than that. So this regulation applies to federal and what CARB considers high priority fleets, as well as any state and local government fleet, which we are a local government fleet. Basically what they're doing is they're developing medium and heavy duty zero emissions fleet regulation with the goal of achieving zero emissions trucks in bus California fleet by 2045. And everywhere feasible, certain agencies, including NID, have a more aggressive timeline that we have to adhere to. This slide says that it's a proposed regulation order. This was actually adopted by the Office of Administrative Law in September, and it is law as of October 1st of this year. So this is no longer proposed, this is law. So this regulation applies to any 3/4 ton and up pickup trucks, so any F-250, F-2500, through the biggest trucks on the road. This slide is just a simple kind of classification of different classes that they use of the weight range of trucks. So a 2B, 3B is going to be a standard, half-ton or 1-ton pickup truck. Class 4 and 5 are like small dump trucks, F2 or F550 type size trucks, and we're just going up each class up until you get to a semi truck. So for sake of reference, we're talking about anything that's an F250 or Dodge 2500 and bigger falls under this regulation. For the sake of example, we have currently about 210 on-road vehicles. Of that 210 on-road vehicles, 90 of them are affected by this regulation. This is kind of just a pictorial reference of the types of vehicles that NID has. We have straight pickup bed, 3/4 ton trucks, lots of utility bed trucks, small dump trucks, water trucks, all the way up to our big vac truck, and the semi trucks that tow some of our equipment around.
This was at mine, no. What
was that?
The vacuum truck was on my road for a period of time. And I thought, I didn't even know we had one of those. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's a very useful tool. They really, really like it.
Very big, yes.
This slides up just as a note, if anybody happens to read this regulation, this will come up, is a primary, like an exemption, but it's not an exemption, but a time deferral. Is low population counties, have a later deadline when they have to apply by, and because Nevada County is designated a low population county. However, because NID works in Placer County, as well, and the way the regulation is written, 90% of the service area in square miles has to be within the low population county. And you take Lincoln and the whole area down there, plus Hydro, there's no way we're close to that 90% in Nevada County. So unfortunately, with that said, the general requirements are, starting January 1st, 2024, so this coming January, 50% of any vehicles that we buy that are in this F-250 up classification are required to be zero emission, either electric or hydrogen. And starting January 1st of 2027, 100% of any additions in this category are required to be zero emission. So we're talking electric or hydrogen type vehicles.
Can you explain the county thing again? So, because of population density in Placer County, all the counties are subject to this?
So CARB designates specific counties low population counties, Nevada, Yuba, certain counties. Placer County is because of Rockland and down there. Placer County is not a low population county. Well, the way the regulation is written, if you're in a low population county, your first date is 2027, 50% of your fleet 2027. If you're in a high population county, it's 2024. Well, the regulation is written to state that if you're in a split district like we are, 90% of the service area has to be in the low population county.
Okay, there you go.
So that's 90% not in the slide. That was something I added to clarify in case you dig into this regulation and see, oh, we're in a low population county, Nevada County is listed, why are we doing this now?
Yeah.
Right, so.
The irony is not lost on me that the group creating these regulations is called CARB.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you already got rid of carburetors.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now they're getting rid of fuel injectors.
So, regardless, we have to start adhering to it next year.
Yes.
And then in 2027, or.
Yeah.
Given that fact that this is an unelected bureaucracy.
Yeah.
But 17 other states follow CARB's regulation.
Yes, it will trickle to other states. Yeah.
And we're gonna have trouble finding enough vehicles.
Oh, yeah, we will, and, of course, it's not a mandate that we purchase vehicles at all. So in other words, we can keep our vehicles we have. If we buy only one vehicle in that classification, we can buy an existing vehicle that we've been buying. You know, we did buy heavy this year to kind of prepare in advance, so we were pretty set for the most part for at least a couple years, because, you know, really what we're talking about here, right, is not buying an electric truck. It's the fact that we have 3 locations that are gonna need charging infrastructure. And all of that is gonna be big money to get that infrastructure in here. So we're trying to figure out how to work around, you know, what can we do? You know, but there is exemptions for availability, but we can dig into that. But it's very, very complex, and this regulation of every regulation I've ever written is like really written to stamp out any kind of exemption we could possibly dig into. It's to the point where if we need a truck, like say the vac truck's a good example because it's very specialized. Right now, there's an exemption for that because you just can't do that in electric. If we put in electric charging infrastructure and we go to replace the vac truck and they say, you know, you can't get one in electric, well, the CARB comes in and says, oh, but there's a hydrogen powered one, you have to buy that regardless of whether you put in electric or hydrogen infrastructure. So they
don't try to work with people.
They're not. I mean, they're even to the point of like.
So 2 points. I guess we're going to be possibly holding vehicles longer than 150, 60,000, maybe even to 200,000, and then. So we also have allocated for 2 automated sending machines for so people don't have to drive out to certain points. So maybe buying a $50,000 automated, you know, gauge might save a vehicle or some miles.
You mean a track?
Jonathan's gonna get into it. We have an entire system on how we determine replacements, but we always look for efficiencies. At the end of the day, we still need vehicles, so let us get into that part of it, and you'll see kind of what our plan is.
And unfortunately, you know, the vehicles that we're talking about where people are driving out, those are all half-ton and small pickups that don't fall under this regulation. We're talking about, you know, our dump trucks that are running loads on the street and stuff like that, and our service trucks that are fixing brakes. Those are the trucks that really fall under this regulation. There's a few trucks, you know, some F-250s that, you know, the way towing capacity ratings have changed, that we were buying F-250s in the past can probably be a 150 now and not be under this regulation as well. So there's some things we're looked at of how we can tweak some stuff to try to buy time, but that's all we're gonna be doing is just trying to buy small amounts of time.
Do they make those big vehicles electric right now?
They make several big vehicles electric. I went to a trade show, even drove some. Where we run into a problem is they're very focused on the delivery market, so like vans, and then big trucks, semi-trucks towing trailers. But this in-between market of like four-wheel drive in particular, because of where we are at, four-wheel drive is almost impossible to find in this dump truck and utility bed type chassis. So,
and if you can't find them, and you replace
So,
them with a,
if you can't find them, you can. So that goes into the exemptions, and it's a very documented process. CARB is going to maintain a list of vehicle types, and then you have to go to the list. You have to prove that you can't find it. CARB's gonna take your request and compare it to all known manufacturers and make a determination whether something will work for you. You're gonna have to put in how many miles you drive, all this stuff to determine the duty cycle. It's just a whole list of things that has to be done.
So my question, Jonathan, is relative to the CARB rules that have been in place, and we bought two new dump trucks recently that had the CARB updates. So our goal would be to run those as long as we can, I assume, because this is a new and higher regulation, right?
Exactly. This regulation is brand new. Like I said, it's been in works for around 2 years that I'm aware of, when I first became aware of it. But the final regulation was just signed into law September. So they signed into law September with an effective date of January. So they didn't give people much time to prepare. But there's no regulation for us in our district, in the state local government part of this. There's no regulation for how long we can run vehicles. So if we see fit to keep them running for another 15 years and 200,000 miles, and we can keep them on the road, currently, there's nothing that prevents us from doing that.
Well, do we put that kind of mile, 150,000, say, on dump trucks or the vac truck? Or do they go more miles or less miles, or do they?
Yeah, the vac truck is gonna put a lot of hours on it, but not very many miles. And really an unfortunate aspect, the vehicles in the district that get the most miles on them are operations F-150 pickups. They're the ones that we're replacing on like almost a 10-year cycle because they've hit 150,000 miles. Unfortunately, those will be electric when the state mandates that all manufacturers are supposed to sell electric, but we don't have to do anything with those. So the ones that are gonna cycle out regularly are good. Unfortunately, because this has happened so quickly, there is a handful of some vehicles and hydro and stuff that are already touching 130,000 miles on them that would have probably been considered for replacement in the next couple of years, that we kind of have to address how we're gonna handle that.
Okay.
So.
On the hydrogen side, is there any sort of a fuel distribution system set up?
Very minor. There's a fueling station down in Rockland area. Generally what they're talking about is they wanna do it on site, but on-site hydrogen systems are very complex. I mean, it's a pressurized tank that it's 10,000 psi of pressure in a hydrogen tank, and a whole refrigeration system that cool the hydrogen as it compresses.
So if you were forced to buy a hydrogen one because that's what was available, you would likely just put a fueling station.
Yeah, you would likely, and it's possible PG&E's yard may have a hydrogen fueling station down there, but obviously that would be for their own vehicles.
Okay.
We may see more come into play. Cummins in particular is really pushing hydrogen. They want to do a nationwide network of hydrogen. regardless, if you're looking at electric or hydrogen, I mean, for electric, we're still talking about our power into this yard will not handle the charging capabilities. Hydro's yard, Placer's yard, you know, there's not enough power even, so PG&E has to upgrade the power coming in, even to consider electric chargers.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize, like, even in the Tesla stations, a lot of those have diesel generators actually fueling them.
Yes, yeah. And a lot of people don't realize how much power it takes to fast charge those cars. So, I mean, our big, huge generator that runs our whole yard here is capable of fast charging 2 cars.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
And if you're talking about a fast charge, you know, an overnight charge is a completely different thing.
Yeah, the high-end ones now for Tesla are 175 kilowatt hours.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you're talking
Yeah.
80, 90, like, even at my house, it's 90 amps.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, and there's been some discussion. We had a Zoom meeting with Televerde, who's a consulting agency, and the electricians have talked with engineering about, and we had some PG&E discussions. They'll look into some options or some grant options, stuff like that, but unfortunately, PG&E's grant options require a purchase order for 2 electric trucks before you can get any money. So you have to commit to buying 2 trucks before you can get the grants. So there will be avenues, but I couldn't tell you to what extent and how much we will be able to get versus how much is going to be out of pocket to do it.
Okay.
Is it feasible at all to consider a collaboration between, like, Nevada County, which is small and relatively poor, to have a jointly shared charging location where multiple public agencies could take advantage, especially building an infrastructure like this? I mean, I realize it wouldn't be as convenient as having it right here, but it just seems like, wow, if everybody's recreating that infrastructure everywhere, that seems really a waste.
Yeah, and it is possible. I mean, it was even mentioned in some of the CARB documents they handed out that smaller districts in particular could collaborate with neighboring districts about charging infrastructure, because, you know, in their mind, they don't care where the trucks get charged, whether it's here or public. We just have to buy the trucks. So it's up to us to figure out how we can charge the trucks.
Right.
So,
Jonathan, what is your take on, not to get off, I did, because hydrogen, each word came up.
yeah,
The direction of hydrogen, because I see some in the news that Toyota is saying, we're not doing electric, we're gonna do hydrogen.
yeah. So Toyota is pushing very much hydrogen.
Yep.
My take from my studies and stuff that I kind of dug into it is I think we may see a trend in hydrogen a little bit for the long-haul big truck industry.
Okay.
Because it's very easy to set up a network, cross-country network of hydrogen filling stations. You know the range of the truck, you can set up the network, and you can take an existing Cummins diesel or big diesel engine, and with some modifications, you can make them run on hydrogen on an existing engine. It's not simple, but, you know, they've changed ahead. But to not get technical, you can do modifications to the engine, very similar to doing like a propane conversion, like a propane forklift. You can inject hydrogen as a vapor with some water.
I was surprised to learn that they were using internal combustion engines.
Yeah, so they prefer not to, because even internal combustion engines on hydrogen still have some amount of pollution byproduct, NOx, that they don't want in the air. So they don't prefer that. And when you're talking about cars, like passenger cars, like Toyota, they're doing battery fuel cell vehicles, because, you know, the hydrogen works in the fuel cell with 0 emissions, makes electricity to run the electric motor. I don't see too much hydrogen for the automotive industry because of the convenience factor. Pretty much everybody here has the capability of putting a charger at their house and can plug their car and charge it and just charge every morning.
For the convenience, yeah.
So the hydrogen has the one advantage you might see in people who like to travel a lot, and that, you know, the fueling stations can fill a hydrogen vehicle very comparable, only a few minutes more than a gas-powered car. So you can pull in. But there's still problems with the network, because a lot of the hydrogen stations can only do about 15 or 20 cars, and they got to shut down for half an hour to refill the hydrogen and repressurize the hydrogen before they can fill again. So it's still not a great answer.
It happens all the gas stations.
Right.
Yeah.
So are we going to start making, at our hydro facilities, we're gonna start making hydrogen instead of electricity?
Yeah. So usually you use a whole lot of electricity to make hydrogen. So
Yeah.
Yeah, there's that.
yeah. So.
Wow, virtual production machine.
Can't pull this stuff up.
Yeah. So next one, which I'm sure most people have probably heard about in the news too, is the SOAR, Small Off-Road Engine Regulation. SOAR has been responsible for regulating emissions from small weed eaters and stuff for years and years. I'm sure, again, it's been in the news a lot lately that as of January 1st, 2024, most small landscape type equipment, we're talking weed eaters, leaf blowers, are required to be only electric. You cannot buy a gas one in California anymore.
Right.
Utility vehicles, I mean, like Polaris?
No, so this regulation, is basically things that are less than 25 horsepower is the baseline. So smaller than 25 horsepower, so that's gonna be riding mowers, stuff like that will fall under here, but most of your utility vehicles are over that horsepower threshold. So 2024 is the first deadline for most equipment, and then 27, they're saying generators, which I'm not sure how they plan to do that, but generators and pressure washers have to be electric.
An electric generator.
Exactly.
I'm not entirely sure, so,
I'm not a car person, but.
yeah,
You're smart enough.
yeah. Well, you know, they live, you know, they live in a world,
They exist today, they have a huge solar panel.
yeah.
A giant solar panel.
Yeah. That you can buy at Costco, it's like $800, and then it's got a bunch of plugs on
So
it.
you have a portable generator
Yeah.
powered by batteries.
Yeah, they sell, you know, basically a generator-sized pack of batteries, and if you live in a world like in the city where a power outage is a 30-minute ordeal and they fix it, that's fine, but I've been without power for 11 days, you know,
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
You know, the second hour is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
Obviously, again, you know, power equipment, lawn garden tools,
Actually,
you like
now,
chainsaw?
So-
you know, we have a little chainsaw.
so, yeah, there is some cutoff in this, so, you know, this is only gasoline powered, not diesel powered equipment. So basically, the regulations, the stuff that is gonna have to be electric as of January is chainsaws smaller than 45 cc, so like a small homeowner type saws, edgers, hedge trimmers, lawnmowers, leaf blowers, log splitters, and then later will be generators and pressure washers, and riding mowers, string trimmers. Stuff that's exempt currently from this regulation is air compressors, like portable air compressors in our truck. Weed eaters, you can take a blade that are bigger than 40 cc, chainsaws bigger than 45 cc, so now you're getting like big falling saws, big saws you'd use in lumber. Chippers, light towers, water pumps, larger water pumps, concrete type masonry saws, shredders and grinders, stationary generators, so any generator that's permanently attached to a facility is not part of this regulation.
Attached to a vehicle, portable?
Well, they're talking generators like, you know, you can go buy a generator for your house that's on wheels.
Yeah, like a Generac or?
So that's a portable generator. Stationary generator is a generator that's basically hardwired to your building and hardwired to a fuel source. So if you have a built-in generator, even a small one, say a 10K generator that's on your propane at your house, it's hardwired to a transfer switch, that's stationary. And then welders. And then anything diesel powered is not part of this regulation. Obviously, this isn't gonna be as big of a financial impact, but still, you know, we have, you know, dozens of weed eaters and leaf blowers and all this stuff, and the battery equipment is gonna cost more. And we've got to look at things like how many batteries we have to buy when we have a guy that's, you know, especially out in hydro, that's weed eating a dam all day where there's no power, there's no charging.
Right.
So, yeah, so we did buy a few things early in the budget, so we have some spare tools that fall in this regulation stored away currently. But, you know, and we'll do our best, of course, in the shop to keep them running, but, you know, small equipment is really hard to, sometimes you reach a point where the cost effectiveness of keeping it running is not there. Yeah.
Do you have a dollar figure, how much more you wanna buy?
I really couldn't tell you because I don't know that there's a consistent number of, you know, failure rate of this stuff, right? I don't know if Cameron has an idea, like if they wanted to buy more this year to stock up.
The things that would be a big concern, like a cutoff saw for pipe repair, those things, they would be into the CC range. Those are also used in a wet environment. We've spent some money this year in our tool budget to purchase ahead of time to have a stock We currently have two that are not in service in the truck, they're sitting on standby. But that would be a tool, along with the weed eaters, for the facility side, that takes care of all the buildings and grounds, that we'll have to look at a different way of doing this.
Yeah, I would say
No
that
longer good.
backpack blowers and weed eaters, smaller weed eaters are probably the primary thing we see through the shop that kind of get destroyed. And the concrete cutoff saws because of their duty cycle, although those were written, it's not under the ruling was concrete cutoff saws. So, we have a lot of small chainsaws that may fall in this regulation. Some of the, water operations guys carry small saws in their truck, but those saws usually see a low enough duty cycle, we're not replacing those saws very regularly. So. And of course, this regulation, they're not going to regulate any existing compliant equipment. So anything that we've bought in the past, as long as we can keep it working, it doesn't have to go away. So this is only new stuff. So again, we'll do our best to keep what we have running, but, you know. Okay, next one. It's portable equipment registration program. So owners or operators of portable engines and other types of equipment, I can't read half my screen, and can register the units through PERP in order to operate their equipment throughout California without having to obtain individual permits from their local air districts. So California is broken up into several different local air districts. Those air districts issue permits to operate diesel-powered portable equipment. So we have portable compressors that they run the jackhammers and stuff with in the street. We have portable generators we use in emergency, portable water pumps. All those are required to be permitted to be run in the air district. Because we operate in multiple districts, we have the option of registering with PERP, which is a statewide registration. So we register once with them and then on a recurring basis. But once you register with them, we can operate in several districts without getting individual licenses to different districts. So that's just the registration side of things. Really what we're looking at is the airborne toxic control measure, which is basically the purpose of the ATCM is to reduce diesel particulate matter emissions from portable diesel fueled engines having rated horsepower of 50 and greater. So basically exhaust emissions, right? They don't want diesel soot in the air. So they're trying to go through and regulate this, and this is what this regulation is.
That includes tractors?
This is only tow behind equipment. So this is anything that has to be towed by something else. So this is going to be chippers, generators, and big compressors. So big tow behind compressors. So this is kind of an example of the type of equipment we're looking at, stuff like this. So fleets are classified as either a small or large fleet, depending on the horsepower range of the fleet, or a large fleet because we have well over 750 combined horsepower with all of our generators and water pumpers and really big portable generators. So there's a tier phase-out schedule, and then large fleets either a phase-out schedule or an average emission standard. We're following the phase-out schedule. So the phase-out schedule is based off of engine tier. So just real quick for a simple explanation, engine tier basically really dictates the age of the engine. It's a rating of how much pollution the engine makes. So tier 0, tier 1, think back to like the 80s of really, really smoky diesels and stuff. And as you go in through your different tiers, through the mid-2000s, you hit tier 3, which is when you started seeing computers on engines. And then when you hit tier 4, that's when you start seeing exhaust filters, things like that, to really try to clean up the exhaust system. So basically what this regulation dictates is that we have to follow this schedule here of phasing out equipment based on the engine tier. So we have tier 3s that are built prior to January 1st, 2009, have to be gone by January 1st of 2025. We can no longer operate those. And then tier 3s built after that date, we have till 2027. We have 2 compressors that we put in this year's budget that we had to replace because of this regulation, or in next year's, for 2024. Unfortunately, compressors that have like 300 hours on them that are in excellent condition that we are forced by the state to throw away.
So there's no more year program where the feds are helping to pay for part of this, like they do in agriculture?
I don't know about this particular one. I know most of these programs have little bits here and there that you can go after.
Federal money at that level would not be worth getting.
Because I managed about a tractor under.
Yeah.
With no tier.
Mhm.
I traded it in and they
Yeah.
paid 56% of the new tractor,
Mhm.
which is significant.
That is very.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're looking into, when these things come up, we're trying to look into any avenue we can to try to figure out what's available for us in terms of all these regulations. You know, there's incentive programs, even back to the electric truck thing, there's incentive programs and stuff that we can take advantage of, which we'll be trying to do as these come up. So really, this is more informational at this point, just, you know, this is what we're looking at.
It's a tight schedule.
It is.
Yeah, it
A lot
really
of-
is. I'm surprised there's not more
Flexibility.
grace. Yeah, and flexibility.
Yeah.
Dealing.
Yeah.
Humans.
And unfortunately with this too is, you know, we have some tier 0 equipment that has been in a district for 20 or 30 years that back then never got registered. Because it never got registered with PERP or an air quality board, now it can no longer be registered. So we have a couple water pumps and a couple of generators that never got registered, so now we can't even use them or add them back into the fleet because of these regulations.
We can sell them.
Yeah, out of state, but, you know, before they go to auction, so they can be sold out of state. All right. So, this is the next one, which is in-use off-road diesel fuel fleet regulation. So this is gonna be self-propelled tractors and stuff above 25 horsepower. So the goal of the regulation is to reduce, again, PM or basically exhaust emissions, PM and NOx, which are two types of exhaust emissions that they're really going after trying to limit. So this is really pretty much, I think, anything that drives itself off-road that's more than 25 horsepower. We have a few things that don't, some of our small excavators, we have a couple tractors, a couple things that are under this 25 horsepower threshold that are not done. So I have to go through and I actually report every year our entire fleet to CARB. And then what they do is they go in and they basically look at the tier level, which we were just talking about, as well as they do a calculation based off of engine year and horsepower to come up with an emission standard, and we report that to CARB. And their goal is basically, and we'll look at it in a little bit more in a second, but basically the goal is each year we have to be reducing our total fleet average emissions until we hit 2028, and then they have a low baseline, and at that point, there's probably gonna be pushing for electric. They're not yet, but they'll probably be pushing for electric off-road equipment by that point. But each year, we have a step down in emissions that we have to meet. Let's forget everything. So again, this is all different types of equipment that we currently have, not our equipment, but types of equipment we have in the fleet that's under this regulation. So pretty much all of our off-road equipment, short of a couple little pieces of equipment. So, in a minute, we'll go a little more in depth into the CARB's calculator and how they do this math, because it comes into the next section a little better, so. So now we're gonna talk a little bit about how these regulations affect and some of the changes we made to these regulations, as well as just internal changes we made to evaluating vehicle replacement. Historically, in the past, NID ran pretty much under a 10-year, 100,000-mile replacement for on-road vehicles. That was it, 10 years or 100,000 miles, it just went away. This is NID's CIP scoring sheet, which is for capital improvement projects. We use this to rate the project, but of course, a vehicle purchase is really not a capital project, even though the funds are in that range. So even though we use this sheet, it really doesn't help us analyze a vehicle very well. So what we are doing, and thanks to Jennifer, this came from City of Lincoln.
Another spreadsheet.
And Jonathan made it better.
So this is, well, I tweaked this spreadsheet to fall more in line with where we want to be in the fleet with replacement schedule, right? So the one that you're looking at here is slightly outdated because we put this together so many months ago, and when I did my last round of vehicle scoring, I tweaked the sheet a little bit. So basically what this Excel sheet does is it gives different points for different criteria, and then we evaluate and we score a vehicle off that. So I'll go through these points here really quick. It won't match what's on your screen. It won't quite match what's on the screen because I've made an adjustment to these point scales to kind of get the replacement where we want them to be. Because it was having us still kind of hit that like 10-year, 100,000 mile mark, and like we want to start thinking at least 130, 140 for replacement. We obviously have to be thinking like 18 months ahead because we got to get it in the budget, and that truck's going to run for another 12 months, and there's a delay in getting the truck. So we have to make sure we think ahead far enough. But we also don't want to be throwing away trucks that have 100,000 miles on them that are in really good shape. So we get 1 point for each 15 months of service. And then 1 point for each 15,000 miles, or 1 point for each 1,000 hours if you're talking about off-road equipment. And then we score 1 point for light duty, up to 5 points for severe service. So what we look at there is like a small SUV that runs around, office people use or something like that. That's light duty. If that vehicle breaks, they can grab a different vehicle. It doesn't affect the district really in any way if that vehicle breaks. Severe service is like a dump truck. We only have so many dump trucks, and if a dump truck goes down, it's a scramble to make that thing work. So equipment like that, and some of the excavators and some of the off-road equipment that's like really critical to getting our job done, that gets a 5-point service. So that will push that out a little sooner because that equipment has to run. You know, we have pickup trucks, just standard half-ton pickup trucks. We have a pool of spare trucks. We got, 8 or so spare trucks. People can jump in anytime. We have a few backup vehicles, but we don't have very much backup equipment. And then we're grading 1 to 5 points for the frequency of repairs needed. So 1 point for 1 repair every 6 months, or 5 points for 1 or more repairs per month. So I go in when I grade this, and I go back into the vehicle history, and I look at how many repairs we've done to this vehicle, so we can kind of see how reliable is it. I mean, we've got some pickups floating around that are like 2007s that have 100,000 miles on them that I change the oil once a year, and I haven't done anything else to. So they're not costing the district much money to just keep running those trucks. So we look at that, and we have some newer trucks that we are fixing all the time, so those are going to get a higher score, and those might go out sooner. And then we're going to grade 1 to 5 points based on the total maintenance and repair costs. So 1 point per 10% of the purchase price. So then we're going to go back in. I have all the records of how much money we put into all of these vehicles, and we're going to see how much did this cost us for the life of the vehicle. And then 1 to 5 points for overall condition and usefulness. So that's just basically a visual inspection we do. Like, is the truck in good shape, or is it just completely destroyed? They've hit, however many fence posts, and everything's dented, and everything's, destroyed, it's falling apart, whatever. So what will happen is that will give us a score, and you can see on your sheet it's rated as, under 18 points is excellent, 18 to 27 is good, and over 27 is replaced. So when I put all these numbers in here, I grade them, do all this stuff, and then this Excel sheet basically spits out this red, yellow, green. But it's still, we don't always take that as like, oh, it's red, we need to replace it, because sometimes, like I said, we have some older vehicles that are touching into the red level, but because it's strictly by age, and there's no way to get the calculator to work perfectly. So we still, once we get to this point, now we know that, okay, yellow is like, okay, we're getting that line, we need to analyze, do we need to forecast this needs to be replaced or not, and then red. And there's some red equipment in here that might be an older piece of equipment that's been paid for so many years. It just gets used lightly, so even though it's in the red, we're not gonna immediately throw it away. But now we have a way to analyze this. Because there's really a couple ways to try to analyze vehicle replacement. Obviously, you have the flat 10-year, 100,000 mile way of doing it. You can use like a life cycle cost analysis, which takes fleet management software that's expensive and punches all the numbers, and they say, okay, this is how much your maintenance cost is going up, this is your depreciation value, the line crosses here, that's when to replace it. Problem with like that is, one, the software cost, and two, we don't really run that way, because what happens with most of our trucks is when they get to close to replacement age, we roll them into the pool lot, so we have some extra trucks, and then from there, when recreation trucks, because recreation has 22 trucks, and recreation doesn't have a budget to buy trucks. So recreation gets the leftovers.
Right.
So our trucks don't immediately just go back to auction and get sold for a profit. They get rolled into pool, then they get rolled into recreation, and then by the time they leave recreation, they're not worth anything anyway. So it really doesn't work for us to do the life cycle cost analysis because of how we recycle these trucks down. So this was the best compromise, and it actually, I know Jennifer said she threw it on me, but I really like the tool. It actually works really well to just paint a picture of what we need to do and kind of an idea. And then it kind of helps look in advance. I did the whole fleet, and now I can say, okay, you know, because some of these are scored like, you know, 3 or 4 from the red, so we might need to replace those in a couple of years.
Can you tell me again, did I hear you say 1,000 hours is scored the same as 10,000 miles?
It's 15,000, so.
1,000 hours is 15,000 miles.
That's how we're scoring it right now, to get where we want for a replacement. The calculation is something like, depending on who you talk to, something like, you know, 40 miles or something like that equals an hour. There's a calculation you can use. Basically what I did is I looked at where we wanted to be, which is like, okay, 7,000 hours for equipment going out, right? And, you know, 140 to 150, 160,000 miles, somewhere in that range is where I wanted them to start falling into the red, depending on conditions. So some go in sooner because the condition's really bad. If it's excellent condition, it might be a little later. So that was just a number I came up with to try to get us in kind of that range we want to be. Because this can be tweaked. It's really easy. It's just a formula. You just change it.
John, it's, awesome work here, but I'm noticing that we have mostly reds, and that the greens don't have a vehicle associated.
So,
can you enlighten me?
This was just a snapshot of one I did. This is not the whole fleet. So this was the first one I did for, of course, a small one here. This was the first one I did. It looks like this is operations, and then there's hydro, and then maintenance. This was actually the first one I did, and several of these vehicles have already been budgeted for, and some of them we've even received as a replacement. So initially, when I first started doing this, we had to come up with the scoring for the vehicles that departments were requesting to be replaced. So they come to me and they said, we want to replace these 5 vehicles. So I scored those 5 vehicles. So that's why there's greens that are gapped here, because I put the gaps in there so that the departments can see the separation between theirs. So
It's just a snapshot.
It's just a snapshot. Well, I just thought, because there's a legend that says they're excellent condition. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm going, we don't have anything in excellent
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, so.
That example.
So yeah, I went through after I did all this, but we put this presentation together so long ago.
Yeah.
The snapshots were older, and now I have the whole thing on my computer, and the whole district's graded, and it's not nearly as much red as it looks like. You're looking at, you're looking at,
right, Chris?
Yeah. 18, 20 out of, 250 pieces of equipment that you're looking at right in the snapshot.
Oh, representative sample.
Yeah.
This is a representative sample that he completed during when we were actually replacing vehicles before he was able to have the whole fleet in. That's not what it looks like.
This is the Italian flag, right?
Yeah. It looks like the Italian.
Yeah. So, and then that also will tie into this. So this is provided by CARB. So now we're back to, I said we're going to pick up on the off-road regulation a little later. So I report all of our equipment to CARB. So it all goes into this calculator that CARB provides, which actually is very slick. And it's very hard to see, but on your little screens, of course, you can see the stars that we put in here. So if you look at the first star, it says 1/1 of 2025 fleet average target met. So the fleet average target is the target for the average emissions that they're talking about. So as you go across the top of this, you can kind of see where my pointer go. Up here, across this line, we're considered a small fleet because we're a municipality. And then this is the total fleet horsepower we use. This is our fleet average index as shown on this. And again, this is just a snapshot. This is not the current fleet calculator. It's just a snapshot we use for this. So this number is what CARB is looking at. So we're at 3.5. So for 2025, the average target they were saying is 3.4. This number goes down to 2.8 by 2028. So that means each year we got to do it. So what this says is basically that we didn't meet the average target here. And then they're using over here, they've got engine tier, and then this is the emissions factor. So these emissions factors, this is basically how dirty the engine is, which is creating that average score. So each piece of equipment gets scored, and you come over here and you can see there's some red, green, stuff like that on that. That is how how that piece of equipment is affecting either negatively or positively our total fleet. So right now, if we buy a brand new piece of clean equipment, they actually give us a slight positive score, and if we buy our old dirty piece of equipment, it gives us a negative score. So basically, just for the sake of example, this is not an exact one. So this is basically kind of like, I went in and I put in some new piece of equipment, made up some new piece of equipment, and then retired out a bunch of dirty pieces of equipment, and this is where it's getting us to be compliant by January 1st of 2029. This no way represents a compliance path we have to follow. It's just showing how the numbers change, which the next one is actually a better slide for that because it shows it side by side. So you can see how we've gone from, you know, our target not met to our target met, but you can see the number of equipment that we have put in is retired in order to meet that. Unfortunately, with this, again, we're looking at stuff like, you know, we have an old dozer and we have an old grader that, you know, are a completely great, functionally operational piece of equipment, but because of this, they have to go away. Some of that equipment has made it into next year's budget to be replaced, the grader being replaced with a skip loader and some other stuff. But it's still, there's still quite a bit we have to do. I mean, we're looking at right now, as we sit, we have some more equipment that we're gonna have to be replaced by a minimum of January 1st of 2026 in order to stay compliant. This is going to be continuously rolling, of course, because as we replace the equipment that has to be replaced, some of our backhoes that you use all the time, they're going to get replaced. They're going to naturally cycle out the older equipment for new equipment because we're going to buy new equipment when we replace those pieces of equipment. Yeah.
So you auction off a lot of this old equipment?
Yeah.
In California or out of state?
It goes to Ritchie Brothers Auction, so from there, that's all I know.
They take care of it?
Yeah, they take care of it.
Auction.
Yeah, you know, I think they handle all that,
Yeah.
you know, because I know that we have to, you know, document when we sell it that it's, you know, the owner's fee award that this can't be run in California, or whatever. There's all those regulations, and the auction handles a lot of that for us. Even the pickup trucks, you know, they go through them, and if the check engine light's on and they won't pass smog, they sell them out of state. And if they're on and they can get them to pass smog, they'll sell them in state, so.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, like Rich pointed out, these timelines are very short.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if we become out of compliance for some percentage of these vehicles? Is there a compliance police? Do they fine us? Is it a $50 fine or is it a $5,000 fine? I mean, you know, I'm trying to get a sense of.
Yeah.
Do they know where you live?
Yeah.
Board jail time is what I'm.
Board jail time,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's fines, isn't it?
I'm sure it's fines.
I don't know what the fines
Like,
are.
I haven't dug into the details
Well,
of what
I'm
each
not
are.
suggesting
Usually
anything
fines are per day,
inappropriate.
per violation, and
but-
they can be anywhere from $10,000 to $32,000, depending on what law it is.
Motivated.
Per day per violation.
Yeah.
Right, but, you know, if there's not a great big stick on the other side of this equation, there might be some reasons to put off.
There's a bigger stick.
Well, and here's the other thing, right? You know, look, guys, we are, you know, right now, we're pretty fortunate. Like, I've never been bothered by CARB. They've never really been in to inspect it or do anything. Well, you know, once you screw up once,
yeah,
now they're in here
Then you're
scrutinizing
on the radar.
every little thing. So it's not just the fines, it's 10 years of headache trying to deal with that after the fact as you go down the line, you know, because it's like, now they're gonna come in, they're gonna check our records. Now they can come in and audit us and get our records. Well, now they're gonna wanna come check every year, and we have to go through all these steps and do all this, and they're gonna check our equipment.
Got it.
Yeah,
Just had to ask.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know, one of my thoughts was, this is very painful,
Mhm.
and I do appreciate the great work and the
Mhm.
analysis that you're doing on this. I think it's excellent. I couldn't help thinking about the last plan for water meeting, and, you know, seeing those trajectories of temperature increase, et cetera.
Mhm.
And just the thought, we can't keep doing the same thing and
Mhm.
expect a different result in terms
Yeah.
of climate. And so some of these painful things and costly things are gonna happen to all of us if we want to get some control of
Yeah.
climate. If we don't, then
Yeah.
we can see
Yeah.
the giant steep curve.
But it was kind of like, oh, I don't like this. And,
Yeah, I don't
you know,
like it either.
But,
Yeah.
I don't like the climate
Yeah.
trajectory either, so, you know.
And, you know,
Anyway.
a lot of this equipment will naturally cycle itself out because, you know, we have newer equipment here that's, you know, like just a slight one tier older that's coming up on replacement age just due to age and stuff. And then that, as soon as you add that new equipment, now it's better. And you know, and we're trying to work around certain things like, as an example up here, like Hydro's older snowcat. They have an older snowcat, which is a tier 2, but that's such a unique specialized piece of equipment to get such a light usage, we really don't want to get rid of that. So the idea behind this calculator is like, okay, well, if we get rid of some equipment we use more regularly, we can play with this and say, okay, we can keep this indefinitely if we tweak this, so we don't have to buy that specialized piece of equipment, we can buy the equipment that we use regularly.
It's like, kind of like you get a bucket of credit, or.
Yeah, and there is credits all built into this too as well, because the cleaner your fleet is, the more credits you get, and it's all, but basically all of this expires in 2028, and I've got more Zoom meetings to listen to from CARB coming up next week, because they're talking about Tier 5 for the off-road equipment, and I'm sure we're gonna be diving into more emissions, and probably electric equipment is gonna be next. And again, now we ask is like, okay, we have a backhoe that sits on a job site for a week straight, doesn't comes in, how are you gonna charge that?
Yeah, exactly.
So.
I want to thank you for doing this because I just don't know how the new equipment, though, offsets some of the old equipment, especially on the regen factors on the diesels.
Yeah.
Because they collect all this pollute and then they regen and throw it out. It's supposed to be burning it up.
Mm-hmm. And you know,
I don't like the methodology of the state.
Yeah.
Down people's throat. And I've heard farmers right in the middle of harvest, and they have maybe an hour left in that day, and the regen hits.
Mm-hmm.
And if they keep going for an hour, it shuts that whole equipment down. Now they're waiting days for somebody to get in. This is more destructive than just buying the new equipment, getting rid of the old ones, accounting for the pollution effect. It's really hurting. It has a deeper economic effect than we can think of.
And even beyond that, you know, obviously from my standpoint, right, the effect of the maintenance aspect of it, right? I mean, you know, all of that technology takes much more technology, so now everybody has to be trained in the shop environment to learn how to work on that. Well, now you've got to buy expensive computer software every year in order to stay up on this, so you can actually diagnose it and fix it yourself, or you're gonna pay the dealer to do it. Well, now, you know, we're at the point where, you know, labor rates are going $150, $180 an hour because it takes, and then now you used to have an hour to diagnose something. Now shops charge 2 hours to diagnose it because there's so much complexity to these systems that, you know.
So I guess and I know Cameron has something there for us, but if we were gonna look at the impact of this on our new budget and water rates, can it be factored in, how much it's gonna cost the consumer?
It'll be included in the water rate analysis. We don't have that number yet.
Yeah, I mean, really, you know, you're looking at realistically, like I've been, you know, we've been talking with, you know, Phil in the electrical department and stuff, and we're really looking at like, really this is almost something that needs like a project, you know, someone to oversee the project, right? With all the electrification thing and stuff like that, you know, that knows all these numbers way more than even I can gather. I can gather the regulations and stuff, but when you start talking about, well, what about bringing in power and stuff like that? Well, now that's out of like my functional part, like my part, make sure all the equipment is up to date and registered with CARB and what we need to do. But, you know, you need like a project manager basically to handle this, to figure out how much is this gonna cost over these many years.
Do you have, a Ford certified mechanic on staff? Like, do you guys go out and get those certifications so you don't have to go to the dealer?
No, we don't have, nobody's in the shop really has certifications right now. I've been a mechanic, well, my whole life, but, and I'm trained in some of the after treatment emission stuff like that for the trucks and Cummins and stuff.
The warranty stuff, you still.
But warranty, we just, you know, warranty they pay for, so it goes out for warranty. Although there's even some warranty stuff we'll fix in-house depending on what it is, because, you know, well, yeah, I mean, you talk about like, you know, we had a truck that had a bad ignition coil. It was a $36 part and it took 10 minutes to change, or the truck was gonna sit at Dodge for a week straight and the guy was gonna be out of his truck. So, you know, there's a little bit of that taken into account, but for the most part, once they're out of warranty, you know, we do all the repairs in-house whenever, as much as we can. You know, there's a few things that we've had to send out because of
If it involves programming, stuff like that, there's certain things that we can't do, because we just don't have access to, not just the training, but the software. You start looking at the software cost, have OEM level software. Well, we have Ford, Dodge, Chevys, and now Toyota. So that's not one software, that's 4 softwares you gotta buy. So we got Peterbilt, Freightliner, Cummins, you know, so we do our best with a universal product that gets us like 90% there.
Okay.
But when you look at the cost of buying all of these software and stuff versus, you know, a once a year or less trip to the dealer for something, it's not worth the cost of, you know, of all that software and all that stuff. You know, we'll give our guys opportunities to go to training if they want to be trained to further themselves. That's all part of it.
Yeah, I was just getting more at the electrical part of it.
Yeah.
Like, with my Tesla,
Yeah.
you just drop it off. You don't even talk to anyone. You leave, you drop the valet key in a box,
Yeah.
and then your app says it's ready. You don't even know what was wrong with it.
Well, you know, then of course that's, you know.
I've had it service twice. I've never talked to anyone at Tesla. Never even seen somebody in the building.
Yeah, and you know,
I didn't know they're doing anything.
No, I don't know.
And you know, of course, that's even like a concern for me as a supervisor, with guys working under me, right, in the mechanic shop is, you know, not immediate future, but in 20 years, where are we gonna be? Are we gonna be able to work on this stuff ourselves? I mean, what are we gonna be doing as mechanics? I mean.
You're gonna be managing carb credits?
Yeah, probably. I already
have
sit
a carb credit, Excel sheet.
I already sit at my computer more than I like every day.
Tesla stock went up today.
Yeah.
Hey, Jonathan.
Did you have something, Cam?
Can I get you to bring up that last slide with the 2 comparisons? Could you point out the difference from
The two Tucker. What do you want to look at the Tucker smoke at? Is that which one do you want to look at?
What I was gonna have Jonathan point out for you guys on this is we have the 2025 one on their left and then the 2029 one.
This is the 2029, so this is the final regulation date, yeah.
The difference every year too, if you could point out the difference in that target number. Every year, that target number keeps getting lower and lower, so.
Yeah, that's what we mentioned earlier, that goes from 3.5 down to 1.8.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Until we're zeroed.
yeah, exactly. So the
Yeah.
target number keeps getting so small that
Yeah.
no matter what, the fleet's gonna end up in a tier 4 and newer.
So after 28, right now, the target number doesn't change, but guaranteed by 28, there's gonna be another regulation that's gonna that's gonna change that target number, and it's probably gonna be something zero emissions electric. Yeah, you wanted to point out that, see the difference, so let's see, I think it's this one right here, the top one right here, no, it's not that one. It's down here, it's, this one right here, this 2016 right here is 130 horsepower. So this is a, 2016 Snowcat, this is 130 horsepower, so this is just showing, so this is a negative 0.04, so that means it's a positive effect on our overall fleet emissions, because it's considered a clean tier 4. So the way the credit's working and everything, that gives us a positive offset on what we need to do.
Who's the bad guy, that 1997?
So we're gonna go, there's a couple bad guys, I was gonna go down here.
Can you buy them a good guy costume?
Rich's Duramax out working.
Yeah, I was gonna, so I'm gonna find it on here is.
This is 92 Dodge diesel.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chris is.
5476 is not the same equipment, that's what I was saying.
92.
H042 is the one snow.
I graduated from high school in 94.
And, H5456 is the other snow.
No.
5476 is their new backhoe. So that's what I was pointing out, so that one, so this 2016 one with the negative 0.4, that's the 2016 tier 4 snow.
Still telling me what's happening.
I don't know.
We are lost here.
We're going to the carb spreadsheet. Well, Jonathan,
Anyways.
Cam, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like we're in good hands.
Yeah.
And, great presentation. I know that that's not your favorite thing to do, but you did a
No.
fabulous
Fabulous
job.
job, great.
Yes, you
Fabulous.
did. Thank you.
I prefer to just be fixing the equipment behind the scenes, but now I gotta deal with all
I
of
feel
it.
like we're in good hands.
Yeah.
You too.
But
You know,
what,
I've never met a mechanic that is not smart, so
that's true.
you uphold that.
What keeps you up at night?
Carb.
What keeps me up at night?
Carbs.
No,
Tesla's taking over the room.
Nothing?
not much of this stuff. I mean, I tend to be the type that's like, it'll be here tomorrow when I come back to work. So this did a little bit because I'm so nervous talking to people, but I mean, in terms of what goes on here, you know, it's like, it's gonna, it's gonna come down eventually, even if this whole regulation with the trucks gets fought in court, it's gonna buy a few years if we can't get what we want, if whatever happens, it starts fighting, California, they're gonna push it. And like you said, in some ways, I think Karen said, in some ways it's not all bad. I mean, you say you have a Tesla, and even me as a mechanic, I know a lot of mechanics are like, I don't want any of that. I'm anti all of this stuff. I want my dirty, loud, whatever, and I have a dirty, loud Suburban. But, from the sake of, commuting and stuff like that, I think the technology is getting to the point where, like, the Teslas have proven themselves where, I commute 50 miles a day. I mean, that would be a perfect situation to have an electric car and go to Roseville to go shopping and back, But we still haven't crossed that threshold of traveling, when I want to go to Arizona to see my wife wants to see her family. Well, now we're talking about a whole different picture there of that. And it's the same thing for us. I mean, there's trucks in our fleet that I think could easily be electric. We have some service body trucks. They drive out, 10 miles and they park on the side of the road. They take their tools out and they drive them back at the end of the day. That's easily doable, right? But then we have dump trucks that are making trips back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and hydro trucks that are going out to Bowman Lake and back. I don't want to send an electric truck out to Bowman Lake on that road, so.
Yeah, the problem is the 2035 regulation puts the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
Whereas Tesla is a consumer product.
Yeah.
And everyone benefits from that, right?
Yeah.
When the diesel trucks are perfected, and then you take that technology and put it on a dump truck, it'll be worth the money.
Yeah.
Now they're trying to force the guy building a dump truck who knows nothing about electrical vehicles to create something.
Yeah.
The way this works well is to let consumer products create the technology and then benefit them in commercial.
I drove at a car showcase. I drove a Nikola Tesla truck that had 70,000 pounds of weight on it. It had a big tractor on it.
It's crazy.
The amount of power and the amount of braking power, it was impressive.
Short 5 years from being production worthy. I mean, they're starting in Texas, but still another 5 to 10 years, then take that technology and put it on a dump truck.
Or, you get people in the truck and say, hey, this is better. Once you say, okay, this is better, I mean, if you're driving, 20 miles a day and it's like, okay, my car's always charged every night, it costs me less than gas, and it actually works, and it's not in the shop all the time, the technology catches up and then people accept it. But California has a history of forcing it beforehand.
Yeah.
So now we're like trying to force it, and then we end up in the same situation we had that, in about 2007, we were forced to retrofit our equipment with exhaust filters. And I was a mechanic in that time frame, and we had nothing but trouble fighting those systems that did not work. Now that brand new trucks on the road, that system in our fleet, I do very little to that exhaust after treatment system. They just work.
Except for the DEF tanks that you rode.
Yeah.
So every 100,000 miles you got to replace.
Yeah, the sensor and the corrosive DEF goes back. I mean, really, compared to what I dealt with in 2008 and 9 and 10, when this was new stuff, to now, the technology, it sucks, but the technology at least works on a day-to-day basis.
Have they figured out, I mean, this is off topic a little bit, but lithium batteries are not ESG compliant.
Yeah.
I mean, so again, it's a sample of harming part of the environment of Earth to take care of a rich country.
So
the third world countries are getting pretty much raped over the, slave labor and strip mining for the lithium batteries. So
I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I research a lot of this stuff outside of the work aspect of it, right? So there is some cool upcoming technology. They're really starting to experiment with and getting into some sodium-ion batteries, which salt is the most abundant element on Earth, with some graphene structures, super microscopic graphene structures that separate the electrolyte. Right now, they're able to get close to 80% capacity of an equivalent lithium battery out of the sodium batteries. They're not volatile, they don't explode, they don't catch on fire, and they're, still not, I'm not going to call them completely clean and safe. They don't have cobalt, they don't have lithium, they don't have all that in them. So there's technology that's coming out, especially for the grid-side storage, right? They have technology where they're taking iron plates and using a process of rusting and unrusting the iron plates to do a very slow discharge to feed the grid. So there's technology there, but like you said, we're in this in the next 5 to 10 years, I think we're going to see this other technologies start to catch up, but we're in that weird transition period where we're dealing with lithium batteries that are a mess, and
Well, thank you for ending us on that hopeful note.
Yeah.
Technology will
Salt is
continue.
the future.
yeah.
You knew it.
The future.
That's what you need.
That's right. Thank you, Jonathan.
All right.
Thank you,
Yep.
Pam and Steve.
Very
Really
nicely done.
appreciate your work.
So,
Okay, we are gonna move, well, we'll ask if we have any public comment on this interesting work stuff. I know, but I always,
oh, Michael's on. No hand raised.
yep.
All right.
And, we will move on to our general managers.
I will make it extremely quick.
She wants to move.
We are likely going to close on the South Cuba Canal this week.
Yay.
Pending some, like, 2 remaining issues that we're deliberating over.
Still.
There is the hearing with the status hearing with the administrative hearing officer that is on Thursday. Staff will be participating with our attorneys. If you, you just be careful if you're participating as a board member, just because, right, we're not, it's not a formal board representation, so we'll handle the questions. And then we have the Nevada County Farm Bureau dinner. So please let Chris know. November 11th. That's it, that's all I got.
I bought my ticket.
Okay, all right,
And
great
it's gonna be
detail.
excellent food.
Oh, I know, it always is.
I'm in.
Oh, good. And what about you, Chris? Are you going?
Making the dessert.
Oh, are we gonna, can we be our dates again like we did last time?
You are what?
What, we were dating at that time? I'm joking. You know, the last one we went to?
The rumor's out now.
Oh, gosh.
Can you make sure to put that in the minutes?
I stepped away from my desk.
No, I'm obviously joking.
Anything else, Jen?
That's it.
Okay. Chris, why don't we start with you?
No report?
Okay, Trevor?
I'm gonna go with no report.
Okay, Rich?
Quick, huh? RC dinner, for people who missed it last week, was excellent. Great food, great times, and it was a lot of history on Nevada County, and especially lumbering. And, mandarins are still not ready.
Waiting, when are they coming?
Pomegranates are, and they're out in the car. Pickup.
Nice. Okay, Vicki?
Yeah, I just have one thing. I had a really productive meeting with Barbara Bashel from the Contractors Association last week. And we had a wide-ranging discussion, but we spent a lot of time talking about that wonderful thing, Greg, that NID participated in for the trade careers, you know? And,
Big kudos to Cam right there.
right here.
yeah, well done, you guys.
That worked.
And the thing I wanted to say about that was when I first was elected, we had kind of an apprentice program or something.
We're looking to bring back an internship program.
Yeah.
We're working on a couple of different avenues that we're not ready to report out on yet, but
Okay.
we will get back.
Well, I wanted to just state that I'm, really supportive of whatever we come up with for that, so that we can support those trades, for entry level, and build benches and have a good group of folks that we can,
we're committed
draw
to it.
on.
Critical.
And, I'm really committed to that, and am happy to help if there's a way in which a board member can help. So, I think it's wonderful. And lastly, there's a lot of interest in NID sharing our climate stuff that we've just been doing. And I don't know how that would translate. I was asked, can maybe you and Karen come and do it? I go, no.
Oh, we can provide a presentation.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant
It's to do a
modeling.
presentation.
Okay.
No, do a presentation.
Yeah, we can do that.
And, here we are, we have this amazing climate information downscaled for our region, and we're the only ones that know about it. And so,
We're more than happy, just have them reach out and we'll.
I will. I'll have, Allison call you.
Okay.
Could we have it for town hall meeting this Monday night at Alta Sierra?
Talk about
Well, I've talked about that offline. Yeah.
Okay.
Allison has asked me if we will participate in I don't know what it is. I think it's a strategic planning session.
Yeah, well, that's been part of it, because
Okay.
they want to be able to incorporate the climate piece into their strategic planning for the coming year or two. And, they didn't even know we were doing any of this, and then I brought some of the modeling, and they went, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd be happy
Okay.
to participate.
Great, that's it for me, thank you.
Okay. I went to the Placer County Farm Bureau dinner on Saturday, and it was great fun. They had a good turnout, a lot of fun, and thank you to the district for sponsoring a table there. We got good press for it. And then we also had, I mentioned last time that the AAUW Nevada County was doing a speaker last Saturday from the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, and they did the union did a very nice article about that program, and it highlighted the great work being done at NID in partnership with SNC. So that was really nice to see. And that's it for me. And with that, we are going to adjourn. Thank you so much.
Bye.